Check, check, check. Black mic, black mic. Hello and welcome to AEC Hackathon Day 2. We will kick off with the tech talks now, which will run from 1 o'clock till 5 o'clock during the day. And we have a lot of good talks and panel debates running. So to you guys online, you can see the program here, or you can go to the homepage blogshub.org to follow the full program. Let's jump right into it. So we will kick off today with a panel debate with Molio plus Covey. We are welcoming Daniel Meyermann. We are welcoming Ole Berat, Nikolaus, and Leise, moderated by Michael Armbjørn. And after that, we will have the tech talk with RIB Software. Matthew Jackson will join us here. And unfortunately, we have somebody who's sick from NIAS, so they won't be with us today. But we will take the chance to have a good break in that half hour's time. Directly back to you, Michael Armbjørn, with the panel debate for PropTech, and we will have Citobo and Autodesk Forma in the end. I will hand over the mic to you.
That's great. Thank you, Aske, and thank you for inviting. All right, welcome to the day 2 of the AEC Hackathon at Blogshub. It's a real delight to be here. This is my 3rd hackathon, I think, and basically in this year's theme we're looking at the triple transition. So we're looking at the most urgent challenge for society, or basically how to make a transition with regards to the built environment in general, and that of course includes both those who are building the new buildings and those who are looking after the existing ones. Can anybody guess kind of the proportion? If you hold up 10 hands, give me the number of fingers you think of buildings that will exist that are already in position, so to speak, versus the ones that will be added. Should we make it easier? How many will be added over the next 10, 20, 30 years? It's probably only a small percentage. Actually, we're stuck with a lot of buildings already. In this panel here, we're going to look at one of the exciting opportunities to basically address some basically 1,000-year-old issues in the built environment. And we're basically going to look at the latest, the greatest, and the most exciting, which is AI. And we're going to ask the fundamental question, which is, do we need to think about AI as an open, collaborative process, or do we need to think about it as a closed process full of secrecy and so on? Because the panel actually has a binary answer to it, maybe we should check with the audience first and see what they're voting for. So if you are a believer that AI systems should generally be open and collaborative, maybe put your hand up. Briefly, okay, we have a few there. And people who think that it'd be better to build isolated systems for the sake of, amongst other things, security. Who would say there could be also a use case for that? Oh, right. Okay, well, let's see.
What about hybrid?
What about hybrid? Okay, so we'll be exploring this topic in the next hour or so. The clock is ticking. We're going to kick off with 4 fast-paced presentations from our esteemed panel of experts here. Daniel from Covey will, I'm guessing, take a little bit of an engineering side to this. Nikolaus is a leading attorney in this field and will give us a little bit to think about with regards to the legal implications. Leise is a startup founder, and she will talk a little bit about the implications for basically scaling this. And then right at the end of the intro round, we have Ole Berat from Contact Lab, and of course one of the sponsors of this panel, who will talk more broadly around AI in the construction industry. So should we, without further ado, get started?
Yeah.
The key thing is that we wanted this to be interactive, participative, and so on. I see a gentleman who has a notebook already. Please take notes, write down comments and thoughts and so on. And actually, they're all grown-ups. They can take a heckle too. So if something is a burning question, do break in and we'll make it all work. So with the first sort of 3-minute presentation, Daniel, I'll leave you to take the stage.
Okay, thanks so much, Michael. Hi, thanks for presenting me, Michael. My name is Daniel. I work within digital transformation and innovation at Covey Group. And I will today present Covey, but also Architema, so both the engineering and architectural aspects of AI. Just a really quick disclaimer, I'm not an AI specialist, I'm an AI generalist. So, so a tough technical question is probably not directed at me. So we had like discussions internally with like-minded like me, and as also our AI specialist the last couple of weeks, when we got this question. So how do we see the future of construction operations with AI? We focused on like 4 areas, key areas here. And these 4 areas is AI will enhance innovation and productivity, especially we see already in COVID. AI will be embedded in the day-to-day operations. That's something that's really something we are doing right now. And then there's really a push for AI-driven design planning processes. And then the last one is that AI will foster partnerships. And I think that's really one of the discussions we'll have also with open and closed. These 4 focus areas, I will go through some use cases that support those. So the first is the use case of having our own sandbox. That's really going for the question that Michael just asked about closed or open AI. So we use both, but we also created like a AI playground internally in COVID just to democratize the AI in all the like day-to-day uses in operations. We see really a high accelerated internal adoption for people not really comfortable using AI because they maybe had a challenge of was it the client confidential material they were sharing in OpenAI, things like that. Now there's like a playground where you can share all COVID's project data and they get that feedbacks for it. So it's really just using ChatGPT, and we already did add-ons with the emails and things like that. And then it's the other thing that I would like to highlight is the OpenAI's marketplace, which is really like accelerating innovation and also democratizing AI, because people like me can actually go in, create AI add-ons and things like that by using the diverse AI models that's already there pre-trained. So it's really like a aim for innovation there. So the next example is something that probably most of you already know. So it's really using AI to drive design and engineering processes of existing workflows. So here in this example, we used AI with Grasshopper and BIM to just prompt design visualizations instead of like handling the coordination between these 2 technologies. And what's really interesting here is that it streamlines the complexity of using 2 really highly specialized tools for people like leading architects that can actually just prompt things instead. So it's really combining these like workflows using AI on top of existing workflows. The other example is example of collaborating with a startup Spore, who is an AI software developer. They develop software to detect and classify and track birds in wind farms. And what they had a challenge was really how to fit this in with the client challenges and having domain knowledge of actually building wind farms. So we did through COVID's co-creator program, we collaborated with Spore, used our clients as examples, and really went into like these wicked problems they had of actually permitting issues around tracking birds, as you can see here, for studies of accelerating the permitting of wind farms. So that's really an example where you used domain knowledge for different parties and having a common business problem of lacking information and then combining efforts. My last slide is actually a statement that came out a couple of weeks ago, I think, and it's really utilizing the statement from NVIDIA's CEO, how we shouldn't learn how to code anymore. We should just, AI will do it for us. And I think it brings up a whole new like dilemma in our industry and the discussion here, because it's a black box dilemma of, for our perspective, is like engineers are asked to do describing requirements, employing accepted calculation methods, and also comprehending results and understanding how you got really to that kind of uncertainty with the results. But AI really is a black box, so for them. So how can you actually take on responsibility for something you don't really know how it got, like the results were compared, how the results came to. So it's really a dilemma I would like stand for as a question mark.
Oh,
That's great. Thank you, Daniel. And actually, a really good point there that basically open collaborative, we're talking about that, but ultimately, if it is a black box, you can't see into it, you can't figure out how it really works, then can it actually ever truly be open collaborative? All right. I think you should give a quick hand to Daniel for sharing his thoughts here. All right. You hinted a little bit about some of the risks within this, both what you called as a practitioner yourself, but also ultimately from the point of view of basically the organization you work with and the organizations you work with in partnership. So to that, actually, what better than to ask a lawyer to basically freak us all out? Tell us more, Nikolaus, about your view on AI and some of the both opportunities and implications.
Yes, thank you so much. And a disclaimer for me as well, I'm a lawyer, which means I have basically no idea what I'm talking about today. But it doesn't really make any difference for a lawyer because we are just happy to talk. Normally I would have brought some slides for you, actually 20 very, very text-based slides. So I guess we are just heading on without the slides. A short legal implication for it.
There should be slides somewhere. Try it.
Have we,
Nope, there we go. All right, whilst we have this little technical excitement, let me actually just check with the audience a quick thing. So if you have 5 fingers and 5 means that you are the ultimate expert ninja, never to be seen better when it comes to using AI, you have all the use cases and so on. And 1 means that you've basically heard about AI today. Where would you put yourself? Ooh. 5 from Lucas, yeah. 2, okay, 2 there. V for victory, there, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, and 3. Okay, so on average, Lucas is pulling it up to 3. That's great. Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. All right. From the experience that you've had of AI so far, how many of you are actually saving time every week? So if you're saving 1 hour, you maybe put 1 finger up, and if you're saving 5 hours, many more, maybe you can go as many as this, right? So let's just quickly check here. Timo, how many hours are you saving with AI? Saving 3 hours. Okay, that's pretty good. I want to know more. How about you? 3 hours? 3 hours, okay, right? Any more? 2 hours, 2 or 3, maybe almost 4? 3 hours, all right, and saving no hours over there. That's really good, okay. So you are basically absorbing all the other hours here. That's great. All right, and at the back, any field? No so far? And no, it's just going analog. That works, I like it. I think I have my notebook here as well, yeah. That's great, all right.
Almost.
And then, whilst we're still having the joy of the technology here, are there any key things that you're hoping to hear from these 4 experts today? This is your opportunity to front load the discussion later. You've got your notebook, any particular things?
No, I think just to get the perspective, because of course it's quite a hot topic.
Okay.
Basically penetrating every single industry and there's quite rapid development going on.
Right, so I'll just repeat back for the live stream. And if you just tuned in, this is basically a discussion around open or closed AI. And the question basically is to get a general idea of the state of an area that's developing very, very, very fast. And now, even more beautiful, Nikolaus, with slides, I give it to you.
20 text-filled slides filled with pessimistic view on AI. So join you guys. I actually did not bring these amount of slides with me. And even though I'm a lawyer, I've actually worked or have been a scientist within the field of BIM, and I'm also have a focus on AI in terms of my PhD. So I have a bit an idea about it, and I have some ideas about the legal implications of AI. The first thing I want to make sure is that everybody is understanding that if we're talking about legal implications and AI, we are not only talking about these famous AI Act from the European Union, which actually has been published in the start of this year. We're also talking about other legal frameworks we have to be sure to be aware of when we're working with AI. One of them is GDPR, which is very important. It's fitting a lot for us people in the European Union. And the reason why these 2 first acts are so important for us is because there is like a huge punishment if we do not fulfill the requirements. But the other things we also have to be aware of is actually IPR and construction law and everything else, because we're not only talking about AI in terms of making sure that we are creating the AI correct, we also have to create an AI which is actually fulfilling all the requirements within the field of law. that sounds like a very, very big problem, and you can already hear the pessimistic thing or the pessimistic point of view that take care of all the laws. Welcome, it's a very easy job for you. But it's getting even worse because I have to say, well, we do not have a legal framework for that even yet, because we have some very old analytic frameworks, especially in terms of contract law, which is fitting very much when working with AI, and in terms of construction law. And we do not have any case law. So when we heard about some use cases with AI, we have to say, well, as a lawyer, we do not have any case law. We do not have any experiences from a court. So the only thing we have some scholars who actually have some ideas, how do we solve these challenges, especially when we're talking about that we have a collaborative work with AI, where we do not have the easy way to say, well, you are the person who actually created the AI. It's your responsibility. Now we have a lot of persons working together, and this is something which we lawyers are very, very afraid of. But I will try to get some few examples where I can tell something about what could be a potential legal risk in terms of working together with AI, or actually what do we have to be aware of? Because even though there's a risk, my main point of view is do not stop working with AI. It should not be a showstopper for us. It should only be something we are aware of, that we can cope with it. We have some lawyers who can cope with it. So we only see the opportunities. The first thing is that if you use AI, there might be a risk that the AI will make some errors in terms of if you have some auto-created designs, if we have some models where we have the AI feeding in some data, these data, they might have some errors. So this brings me from the first picture to the last picture, because we have some quality assurance, which in my point of view is something which feels very much also from a legal point of view, because you have to expect when you work with your AI, you have to ensure the quality of the data you put into the AI, and you have to have some quality assurance on the product which you get out of the AI. If you do not have so, there might be a risk that you not only are responsible for the AI and the AI creating the wrong mistakes, but also being responsible for not checking up what result you're actually using. I guess a lot of you have seen the results of using AI without quality checking. You have heard about this Chinese article where all the pictures were very wrong. You have seen some pictures from a pope being black or a pope being a male because the AI is just working itself, and you have to check the quality of it. GDPR is something which is fitting very much in the European Union. Be aware of if you work with some advanced system. Actually, at least I heard about an example in Germany where you actually have some face tracking on the building sites in terms of knowing who is working on the building sites. It's not so easy. You have to be sure of you are not allowed just to check faces to register who is there. You're not allowed under the AI Act, and you are collecting some data which may affect your GDPR compliance. And then the last example, which is, in my point of view, very important for the construction sector, is critical infrastructure, which is a term which is getting more and more important for us, even or especially after the Nord Stream 2 thing. And the war in Ukraine, we have like a whole other view on safety in our society. So in terms of using AI, especially open models, collecting data, feeding a model with data, be aware of what data you are putting into it. Not only as a person, like as a consultant or as a person working for the contractor, but also for the employer, which actually at the final stage has the responsibility for the data. So. And be aware of that critical infrastructure is not only such a nice bridge or a tunnel in between Germany and Denmark, but critical infrastructure might also be like industrial butcher. It might be some water pipes. It might be some public transport. It might be banks. You have a whole lot of information which you have to be very, very important in terms of using an AI. And then the legal perspective, how do we solve these problems, at least before we have a legal framework? Well, the first thing is that we are most likely going to regulate this in our construction contracts. We will see that we have some more requirements in terms of telling that we are using AI, telling what we're using AI for, and having some regulations for us in terms of to make sure that somebody could be responsible. The next step might be that we say, well, we do not have any idea of who will be responsible if people are working together with AI. A result might be that we have a new liability scheme, which is heading into that nobody is responsible by themselves, but there might be insurance made by this, a police insurance company, which actually are going to pay if something went wrong in terms of not having anybody being responsible for it in the first hand. And then the next and final step will most likely be that we head into a more regulation on this field. Basically, right now we have no regulation. We have no AI regulation in the field of construction law here in Denmark. We have the AI Act. We have some ideas how we're solving it, but we do not have anything right now. But I'm sure that we, in terms of as we're heading into the problems, we will try to solve them by regulation.
All right.
That's all for now.
Let's give a quick hand to Nicolas. So what you didn't talk about is the fact that AI could also impact basically the legal profession. But from this, there's an infinite number of new cases coming in. So it's all going to be fine, right? You guys are going to be very, very busy in the years to come.
In the years to come, but we're talking about, we're waiting for the first BIM cases here in Denmark, and we were waiting for the last 6 years, and there's no BIM case coming.
Right.
So right now, people, maybe they do not know that they have some problems yet.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So we first heard from Daniel from COVI with some concrete cases, and that we now know a little bit more about the legal framework and so on. Now we're actually going to basically put some a wire into this, because now we're going to look at how can you actually scale some of this. We're going to hear from Liza from Pathways AI.
I'm going to jump out here. I'm the co-founder of a startup called Pathways. I guess just to get a better understanding of the room, how many of you are either already in startups or interested or keen to start something? Okay, fantastic. Well, then you're in the same boat as me, right? How are we actually applying and using these range of technologies that are being spoken about all the time for something that's potentially useful for your clients? So I'll use this as like a little bit of a shameless promotion combined with how do we actually use AI, right? Because, I mean, I'm building a startup, so I need to do that. So, I mean, at Pathways, what we're building out is what we call the data layer for sustainable manufacturing. So if you look around in the room you're sitting in right now or at home, the chair you're sitting on, the paint on the walls, the tiling, the glass, anyone who's produced any of those are material manufacturer. And those are the customers we work with. We actually help the material manufacturers generate what's called their life cycle analysis. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. So this is really in short what we do at Pathways. And I'm going to give a short overview of that first, and then talk about how are we applying different types of large language models to solve these core challenges. Right. So, you know, in short, our platform creates these real-time product lifecycle analysis. How do we do that? Well, we integrate into what we call unstructured supplier data. This can be more or less structured, but when you have what's called a lifecycle analysis, you ultimately need all the material information, how it's transported to a plant, and then what do you do with it at the plant. That means you need to figure out what's the chemical breakdown, what's the fuel type used in the truck that moved it. On your actual plant, what kinds of fuels are you using? We pull the vast majority of this data from invoices, right? So tens of thousands of invoices in all different formats and structures, some with a little bit of handwritten notes over, some that have kind of different complexities. And you can probably your heads are probably already spinning around how we are applying large language models and ingesting that data. And that's very much in the first bucket, right? This isn't generative AI, right? So when I talk about generative AI, creating new information. This is really around that point Nicolas made about quality assurance and making sure you pull the right data. So we're training the models on ingesting these thousands, hundreds of thousands of invoices, making sure they pull the right information at every given point in time. Right? So that's a different type of feedback loop. It's not about generating new information, it's about making sure we ingest the right type of information. I think keeping that distinction, figuring out what kind of AI models are useful for the problem you're solving, rather than just this like AI is generally useful. Right? Then the second two parts of what we do is kind of visualizing the plant and product level emissions so people can actually do something about them, and then generating a bunch of documentation that they need. This is the kind of documentation that's most broadly needed in construction industry. One little caveat, while I'm Danish, our business operates a lot in the US, which does mean that some of the data ingestion sites looks a little different. But I mean, not very different though. But when we talk about this environmental product declaration, that's a 20 to 30 page document with a range of environmental information, really summarizing the life cycle analysis. It's also incredibly boring. right? It might as well be a long legal document. So this is where we're starting to test out some of these Gen AI applications. Like when we have that underlying model of a life cycle of a product, how can we then apply generative AI to write out product description, to write up summary, right? So that you don't need someone to manually then write out these documents. And then I'll skip this one because it's too text heavy, but it's kind of what happens behind the hood. And instead show you an example of one of the dashboards we're testing with customers right now. Right, so what's really key when I think about decarbonizing manufacturing and why AI is so powerful to help it, it's one on the data ingestion side. That's the stuff they don't see, right? Like no one knows what's happening as we plug in and pull and structure that data. But what they do see is the output side, which is how do I engage with this information? And one of the biggest challenges when we think about material manufacturing, again, like producer of this chair here, right, is figuring out what part of the supply chain of that chair, what parts of the product, I'm going to guess the chemical compounds that are used in the paint that covers them, is actually driving climate degradation and biodiversity loss, right? And one of the things we are starting to apply, and that kind of gets to that first example of your COE sandbox, right, is being able to ask normal questions into this, right? You have sales teams who are like, so what does this mean in terms of climate question mark, right? And being able to just ask that directly into the data and then get written response back in regular words is something we think is really valuable. And I realize the time is running, so I will finish up. And I can feel that by Michael kind of walking closer to me, right? But I want to get really clear here, right? So one of the things that says down here is photochemical ozone creation potential, and it's going to say ostrification potential, right? Like no one knows what this means. Ostrification is how many algae are created, right? So using plain language and leveraging AIs to be able to actually explain what's happening when we want to decarbonize is really critical. And then a call for action for how can we get this is anyone who's building anything in a startup needs data, right? So when we think about where are the big corporates we're either already working with or who are being really helpful to us, it's when they create sandboxes of data that we can train our models on. Right, that's really the big ask, and I guess to counter that NVIDIA quote, although I know you were going back and forth on it, we don't need software engineers, right? I mean that's certainly not the case when I think about it, right? In my mind, software engineers are the creative people who are now able to use these languages and apply them in much better ways. So there's certainly lots of excitement on my side for my own software team. Yeah.
All right, please give Liza a big hand. All right, we basically almost halfway through the time we have today. Time runs fast when you're having fun. We're going to have Ole just share a few of his perspectives from the Contact Lab in a moment. But basically what Liza is adding is an extra level of nuance in the understanding of basically open versus closed, and also the need to, in some cases, maybe cordon off systems for training only to basically explore them and so on, especially because there could be legal liabilities in letting things loose too quickly. But without further ado, Ole, you're actually the person who brought us all together, so please give Ole a warm welcome and come up and share your thoughts.
Thanks. What's it called? Yes, I'll try to share a few of my thoughts on this topic here. And besides Contact Lab and Molio, I'm also responsible for Building Smart in Denmark, which actually is an organization that has been working for open data and open data exchange for many years. So that also forms a bit my thoughts here on AI. So basically, AI can give ordinary people superpowers. I think that is an important thing to get into your mind. It enhances people in their work, and I think what I in my practice see is very interesting. I mean, it's very interesting to talk to Daniel and Covey, but it's even more interesting to see all the mid-sized, smaller contractors, engineers that also start looking into that. And I believe that really can make a difference for them and maybe get them to catch a little bit up to the Coveys. I think, in very general terms, for me, AI is best where there's loads of data. So AI is dependent on data, and if you ask questions within the data, it gives you reasonable answers. The longer you go away from the yellow part of the egg, the worse the answers get. AI can also fill holes if you have data points here and here and here. it can extrapolate, what's it called, interpolate, difficult word, and give you answers in reasonable distance to the data that you have. What AI is not so good at is give you answers that is far away from you. That's what we call hallucination, because especially Gen AI is just giving you an answer, even though it doesn't. It is very unsure of the answer. So if we don't have much data, AI is actually not that good. And that is also the reason why DALL-E is much better at making pictures of fluffy kittens than it is of a construction site. So it tries to imitate a construction site here, but lots of people, lots of machines that doesn't really isn't any thought into. Lots of rebar everywhere. So it's the right elements, but it hasn't completely thought through what the construction site looks like. And I think that is one of the problems that we are having, is that there's not much. I mean, compared to other data, to other industries, there's not much data out there in construction. Keep saying to ourselves, we have a lot of data, but that data is not really on the internet. That is on our own CDEs. It's on our own platforms. So there's not much data to train on. So I tried to figure that out, and it is a little bit back of a napkin calculation. So try to find some numbers, but maybe a half, maybe a whole % of the data on the internet might be about construction. It's probably less, and that means that DALL-E, ChatGPT, Gemini, and what they all are called, they're actually not that good at construction. So if we want to do something about that, we need to think about how can we provide more data that is about construction, especially if we live in a little ecosystem as Denmark, because we are actually having even less data than big markets like Germany, the US, China, and that thing. So we need to figure out how can we create data and how can we provide it both to big players but also to startups like Pathways to make better software for us.
All right, that's great. Please give Ole a quick hand. Yes,
sorry.
That's all right. All right, so maybe this is also the time when I should briefly explain. I'm Michael Ambjorn. I run PropTech Denmark. I'm here with my colleague Lucas. And actually one of the things that we've done for the AEC Hackathon is to put in a challenge that actually works at a much simpler level than AI. It's actually ultimately, in the first instance, just agreeing what needs to be in a spreadsheet, believe it or not. Because basically what Ole says is that the construction industry is a little bit behind on the data front. Well, what we are here to tell you is that the real estate industry is even further behind. Basically, there is even less data to draw on. So quite a lot of the ambitions and aspirations when it comes to AI are even further away from being fulfilled. That said, we are going to dive into basically a panel format now. I'm just going to try my luck with the technology here, see if we can maybe get the panel back here. But to basically... Oh, look at that. We can multitask. Imagine that. Maybe we start off with basically a quick reflection. You basically say it hybrids in your approach there. From what the presentations you've heard just now, Daniel, have you had any opportunity to basically reflect a little bit more on the fact that you were the first to present and what have you learned, right?
Yeah, so I think I'm completely behind Ole's perspectives of really sharing data also in order to actually get benefits across the industry.
Yeah.
I think in my perspective it's still a hybrid. I think we need to have closed environments, closed loops, and also open loops. And it's just more about understanding what is critical data, what is confidential information from our clients, and what is not. Right. There's a lot of information that's not confidential. The same with the discussions we had when GDPR came in, like what is GDPR actually and what is not. Yeah. So it's really, I think that's the discussion we need to have. And I think that's one that will really be, I think people will dive more into that sandbox environments at the beginning, and then they will, okay, it's not, everything is not a problem sharing, and then they will broaden it up. But they also need to learn how to adapt it themselves first. Yeah. So it's really, I think there's a two-sided effort there.
Right. Okay. So two-sided efforts. Yeah. From a legal standpoint, basically, you potentially have insights through all sorts of contracts and whatever else that are related to the built environment. You could put them all into an AI and generate new insight and so on. But how do you do the information classification to figure out, does this need to be kept secret? Could this be used to train the model? Discuss.
That's actually a very, very big step to take for our clients, because nobody's really aware of it. Like half a year, we had this new directive, NIS2, which was focusing on critical infrastructure and the way of making sure that your data are safe. And it's very difficult for us to understand what is safe data, especially because we had like this development, what are like critical data, like 3 years before, was like a very, very low amount of data, because we were like so open-minded, and now we are realizing everything could be potential critical data for us. So that's like a big step to take, which would say that our clients would right now prefer like closed systems, because they're afraid of the results of it. And the problem is, even though, as I said, with the legal implications, a problem is if we do not know what the legal result is, we are trying to get safe way, which means do not open up, do not share data.
Right. And then just to illustrate with a practical example, I'm sure you all know it, I think it was Samsung, where the programmers basically were running their code up against ChatGPT, and guess what? We can get ChatGPT now to program like a Samsung programmer, right? So there are all sorts of ways that this information can get out, right?
And that's actually a big point in terms of quality assurance, and the side we had from the NVIDIA boss. Actually, you need to understand how to program by yourself, because if you do not know it, you're not able to know what your AI is doing for you. Right. And that might be a big legal risk. If you develop an AI to do not know what is happening in the black box, you have a problem.
Okay. Liza, you need to get a lot more information to basically train these models. What's the biggest obstacle you're coming up against? Apart from the legal department.
Which is challenging. I think there's two different parts I think about in our business. The first is, in some ways we're generating more data by actually using large language models to ingest some of these unstructured documents that weren't, so to speak, online before, and to generate life cycle analysis and EPDs. We're pushing up the data from the material manufacturers that people in construction need and architects need to make choices, right? So there's one side of it which is actually applying AI in the really unsexy, gritty places to generate the type of data that other players need. I mean, I think one of the challenges we're hitting is this kind of, and maybe that was your answer in the first place, is this black and white approach, right? It's very different to give access to data versus letting that data run directly on OpenAI's platform, right? Like those are two different questions. And I think where we're seeing the corporates, the big companies that are moving the fastest and making the most innovation and the biggest strides, they're able to create really good sandbox data environments that they then let startups do a lot of things with and experiment on without being afraid of what the answer is, right? Because I do think one of the things with Gen AI is you don't know necessarily what the answer that comes out on the other side is, right? And that means you can't have control over understanding the complexity of where in your supply chain might there be challenges, right? That's both a big upside, but it's also something that supply chain managers then are really nervous about.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there is basically a hybrid approach, and there's a two-system approach, effectively, with opening and closing along the way, and quite a lot of experimentation, and then a deep kind of realization that a software programmer now can be part of a critical infrastructure in a way that only civil engineers maybe were in the past. So basically, a very large bridge could, or the equivalent of, could collapse as a consequence. But on the other hand, what I'm also hearing is that potentially a very large bridge could be built much quicker, right? Ole, part of your role is to also be, the Renaissance man, thinking about this whole field across the whole thing. What are your key takeaways from the 3 other presentations?
I mean, I think it's positive also, as you asked the first question, that everybody says, of course, we agree on AI should be open. I'm worried is too big a word, but I'm a little bit worried about what Nicholas is saying, also because we have been discussing BIM a few times also during this conversation, and we have a long tradition, especially in Denmark, for open BIM, for building smart, for open data exchange. We often rather exchange a little more data than we actually are obliged to, because others Others can benefit from it. I fear a bit that this focus on AI, that this focus on data, also will lead to that people are a bit more worried about it, that they get more protective about it. I don't see that many construction contracts anymore, but I heard a little bit on the water pipes, as you would say in Danish, that contracts already are getting more narrow. What that depends, and excluding.
So you're saying basically the pendulum is swinging a bit towards basically proprietary, right? And those of you who worked in software will be familiar with the fact that the software industry originally actually quite an open area because it came out of academia, eventually turned into proprietary because that's how you could make the money. There were some open source business models. There still are some open source business models. Still, Red Hat is not owned by a foundation, just in case you're in doubt, the Linux distributor. And then what you're saying is that there's the pendulum is swinging a little bit.
The pendulum is swinging in the wrong direction.
In the wrong direction.
Currently, because there's so much focus.
All right. I think that's a perfect point to basically open up for questions from the audience. So here live in Copenhagen at the AEC Hackathon, we have a group of hackers. And early on, we found out the confidence level, on average, 3 out of 5. This is an expert group, though, so probably quite modest. Should we see if there's a question in the audience? Otherwise, I've got some old favorites. I'm going to, volunteer. Especially the Finns always have very good, well thought out questions. Do you have a question, maybe, Timo, for our expert panel? There's even a microphone. That's what I call service. Timo is the CEO of Killer Hub in Finland and an expert in construction. Otherwise, if you shout the question, I will repeat it for the audience online.
Does it work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thanks for putting me on the spot. Yeah, so maybe it's just a question of there's so much opportunity around us, and things have accelerated a lot, but still we could do a lot more. So how do you see kind of the ways of accelerating this to reach the actual impact on productivity, on sustainability, even more? Because I think we should do even more.
All right. So basically, how can we accelerate the process? Who would like to take that one on?
I can start saying that, then the others can think a little bit and say something different. How can we accelerate it? I think what we are a bit lacking are the construction-specific applications, especially of Gen AI. I think it's very clear because Gen AI it's very much the first wave, at least that hits a broader spectrum. So they will come. So I think everything that can. Inspire, inspire you guys, inspire startups, inspire smart technical people to find some use cases and build some generative AI solutions that will help. And then, of course, as I also was advocating for, I would believe if we as construction actors start putting data together and figure out under what conditions we can share that, people can start building more construction-specific AIs. Based on that.
Yeah. All right, Liza, and then Daniel.
Yeah. I think there's kind of two things in my mind. The first is it's a red herring to be like, we want to build an AI solution, right? What you want to build is something that helps someone, right? Solve their problem, and then AI is this incredible machine that you can rarely apply to all of that problem, but you can apply to parts of it. So. Focusing on who are you actually solving something for? And when I think of really exciting things in the architecture construction space, so I'm down with the material manufacturers, but in that architecture construction space, it's things like AI generation for floor plans, right? Being able to just write in how would you like a house or a dynamic or something to feel, and then get a bunch of suggestions about floor plans, right? That's suddenly super helpful for an architect who's previously been drawing all that out, right? And being able to use your words to describe it without having the scientific knowledge to translate. But again, it's centered on where is it useful, rather than just let's apply AI, which I think can become really gimmicky.
All right, so what I'm hearing is AI could be the new app, you know, people coming and knocking on the door going like, oh, we need an app. And it's like, yeah, you need to solve a problem. And then the problem might be, or the solution might be an app. Just to make it concrete, should we mention just 2 or 3 examples of AI solutions that are already out there that could do this for you on the floor plan, for example? So there's Finch 3D, for example, there's Layout, Parallelo, and then a broader, like whole plots. You guys worked with parametric design at one point, a Göteborg-based startup. Fantastic. What would you like to add, Daniel?
No, but I actually think that really the parametric design is really an interesting space. When also the example I showed that parametric design really had been a challenging adapting it into our business because it needs like specialist knowledge around creating scripts, all of that, and really we see AI now like bridging that gap like between project managers and design leads, things like that. So they actually can start innovate and having these like problems saying, can you try to give me example of that and analyze the data in this way or something like that? Right. And I think that's really what we see also with the sandbox environment is that it comes out to everyday people that actually doesn't have any coding skills and things like that. So they start like thinking about AI as something of an innovation muscle or something like that. Right. Muscle. Yeah,
that's a good point. So let's just quick check here. Who uses ChatGPT? Yeah, and who has basically AI enabled in your Office package from Microsoft? Okay, interesting. From Google, or use an email tool like Superhuman or something like that? Okay, so mainly ChatGPT. All right, okay, that's where all the data is going. Great. You had something to add, Nicolas?
Yes, to Ole's point in terms of it's very important to build an environment where it's normal for us to share data. One step could most likely be that state authorities are obliged to share data in terms of, because they are one of the biggest producers, especially in the construction industry. So if you, like you did it with BIM for a few years ago in Denmark and most of the countries in Europe, that you make the state authorities obliged to use BIM to share data, you will create an environment where you actually have some data you could put into your models, which make the models more qualified.
So what I'm kind of hearing is that in Denmark there's a database called BBR, which basically has data on properties that potentially that could hold a BIM model of the building. Potentially.
Yes, potentially in terms of that you have like, if the data you can share, but put your BIM models in. You talked about it in Norway, you talked about it in England to do so. Right. So that would be a database where you have data you can use for your models.
All right, great.
Just a small comment on what Daniel said is, and also what you referred to. I think what's actually cool these days is that we are in this computational BIM world that we actually are coming from. That's a specialist thing that it actually gets productified. That we actually are seeing products now that regular architects and regular engineers can start using instead of that it is a specialist thing. And I mean, that is something that we should look more into as we discover new uses of AI, is how can we productify these things?
Yeah, and if I could maybe just add a point there myself, amongst our membership are a lot of pension funds and other large actors that are basically looking after basically your pension or the later stages of your work life, so to speak. And amongst those, there are large portfolios where maybe there was a BIM model at one point, and then when it was handed over from the construction company to the people who run it every day, somehow the BIM model, well, it's not there anymore. Now maybe there's a shoebox with USB sticks and so on. And there are even startups that are basically specializing in going in, finding the USB sticks, collating them, plugging them into actually an AI to kind of reverse engineer and create the model again. And one practical example of that is the Norwegian startup Findable, if you're not familiar with those. We're going to be ready for another question, maybe. Yeah, just here. Maybe briefly introduce yourself as well. That would be super helpful.
Sure. I'm Nick Catania. I'm with Climate Point out of Norway.
Great.
Scope 4 and impact investing. How are hallucinations, data quality issues, fake sources, bad sources affecting each of your workflows and goals?
All right, great. The mycelium question. Who would like to take a stab at that?
Well, I can definitely jump in on that, right? So in the actual ingestion of data, that's not a problem for us because that's all about passing through existing information. So there we don't hit hallucinations. Where we are seeing potential for hallucinations are two places. So one is, now it's going to get really technical, when we think about matching materials with potential environmental impact factors. We're pulling from a range of different databases, easily up to more than 100,000 different impact points for each different component of like a chemical or material, right? And in that, we're trying to use AI to match that much better. And I think it's becoming clear to us that that's not something that's live and we've deployed. And the reason for that is because we just need so much data to refine and process that type of model to avoid it just picking something really random or making something up, right? And some of it is making easy constraints, e.g. you cannot make something up, you must pick from this data set, right? But some of it is more complex. And the same holds for anything on text generation. I mean, anything on the Gen AI side when you want to interact with data in a prompt type way. I mean, I also think hallucination exists with real people, right? You ask them something and they get uncertain and they don't know and they make up an answer, right? So I mean, I think we approach it pretty much like how we do it with when you ask someone and you can see they don't know. And applying that kind of philosophy to our AI has been quite helpful.
Right, so basically I'm hearing the need for continuous critical thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little bit another take on it, but it had also to do with using AI for, what's it called, showing yourself to be more competent than you actually are. I think an interesting discussion we often are having with contractors currently is, can we use AI for our tenders? How can we use AI for our tender materials? And on the other hand, we are seeing clients that also say, hey, all this ChatGPT must make it much easier for us to evaluate tender material. So there's a world, what's it called? There's a world emerging where an AI both makes the tender material and evaluates it, and I think, and I think also, and that is probably something we should look into how we can make smarter. But I think there's also a risk in this tender world that people are seeming more competent through AI than they actually are, which is also something we need to look into. So we're discussing a lot of deep fakes, and everybody's very worried about all the elections happening that year and what will deep fakes and Zora, the video service from OpenAI, what will that do to our news? But actually also in a professional sense. This can do that people seem more competent than they actually are, and it gets harder to evaluate what are you actually able to do.
Right, so just on that note, that's really interesting from the point of view that actually a tender is an incredibly important process for basically reaching an agreement about what's going to happen and a commitment and so on. And I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said the greatest illusion around communication is the fact that it happens, right? Basically we potentially putting this on steroids, right? And what we learned with the rise of social media, I would contend, is that basically people thought, okay, well, I can communicate with people at scale. Well, it turns out that Timo and I actually communicate best when we meet and we talk to each other and so on. That is not just an update for 100 people that does it. So there's a scaling element here that I find absolutely fascinating. Daniel?
Yeah, I'm completely agreeing with both of them, and I think there's really a way forward that you need to be able to have the main knowledge around what you're doing in order to actually quality assurance.
Right.
And I really think that's really what the NVIDIA statement is, that you'd still need programmers, you still need people to understand it, and it's really like, as Ole is saying also, really that people are like using data for things that I don't really know anything about, and then they're using these answers, so they can't be critical to it. Right. And I think that's really, you need to, I think there's like a partnership model here where you both need to get it out externally, but also internally to able to quality assure the data, the answers you get.
Right.
So you really need a diverse range of people when using AI in order to qualify it.
And to stay sane, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So that you're not hallucinating yourself.
No. But I have nothing to add.
Nothing to add, right?
No.
Well, in that case, we are running through time very fast. We have time for maybe one final question here. Two more questions, depending on how complex they are. We'll see how we go.
I have a question.
I have to say, not that we are picking winners here, but the winners of the question section are so far over here. Could we? Yeah, fantastic. We just need to get a microphone to you. Asker is on hand. Oh, excellent. Maybe just briefly introduce yourself. That would be helpful.
I'm Shafat So actually, my question would be like, what do you see like in the industry? What is the biggest interest out there now pushing it to development and everything? So is it like cost cuttings, or is it like a workflow efficiency? What the industry needs now?
Okay, so cost cutting or workflow. Maybe I should add that we are compiling data on the real estate industry right now, and we're seeing one thing go above that. It used to be cost cutting and a bunch of other issues that I was kind of, on par. What we're seeing is that the green transition is beginning to win out. But those are three good options, right? So any thoughts here? Yeah.
I think there's really like cost cutting is always something that's really huge, especially also for Covey and all of the other design consultants. You see it as like, but it's both cost cutting being based on productivity. So it's really like the project margin on our projects are so low that we need to be more productive. It's really like handling fragmented data in our industry and like optimizing these workflows and we need to know a lot of things earlier than we did before. And the complexity in our projects raises quite a lot. So really cost cutting it going into these areas.
And what I'm actually hearing there is not just cost cutting, I'm hearing risk management as well.
Also risk management,
right,
yeah.
which is a way of cutting costs, arguably.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, to be totally honest, that a lot of the functions that get easily automated by AI are entry positions where people used to learn the craft, right? And we're going to, when we look 10, 20 years down the line, we're going to struggle because those people who need to have the critical perspective, they have a critical perspective because they used to draw out a floor plan. Like, now you wouldn't draw out a floor plan, and then next you wouldn't even do the BIM model, or you wouldn't do the design element, and then it's like, well, which architects are going to hold up that critical standard in 20 years? Right. What that means for like young people, from my perspective, kind of entering the workforce or being early in their career is like leaning into these tools, figuring out where do you add value, how are you using them? Because they're the same as like when I started my career in consulting, right? Where like one of the senior partners talked about how they used to make slide on paper with like a ruler and like check out the line and the margins, right?
I thought McKinsey still did that, but
and that's kind of the same principle I would approach it with. Yeah.
Great. Any final quick? Ole?
I have one. Of course, I have one. I believe it's currently what drives AI the most. I think it's curiosity. I think people are very curious currently and want to explore it. And of course, that will eventually lead to all the other stuff. But to me, I always compare it a little bit to when the iPhone was introduced, because especially all the Gen AI tools are personal tools. So that is something that you use for yourself. So it's not a company solution. It's something that currently at least enhances your ability. So a lot of people are curious, and that was a little bit similar with the internet, and that also was a little bit similar with the iPhone. Both were not corporate things, but were something that people used their spare time on exploring and were being curious. And then 2, 3, 4 years down the line, right, it ended up with business. It ended up with business applications.
Okay, that's a really important insight, right? So basically, that your personal curiosity is absolutely crucial to this going forward. We're going to close up with a super fast speed round. We're going to ask basically, hear from you, what's the one thing you wish you had known before you walked into the latest wave of AI? Oof.
Okay. Thanks for the spot.
Yeah, exactly. Go on then.
So I think one of the things we're discussing right now is really the challenge, and we didn't discuss it today, but the dilemma of actually AI using a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So really the sustainability agenda and everything. On one hand, we really want Covey is pushing the sustainability agenda for our clients.
Yeah.
In the other hand, we really want to use AI, which produce a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So it's really a dilemma struggle right now.
That's a really good point. SDG 6, so basically water is one of them, and
water,
electricity as well. Nikolaus, what do you wish you'd known?
That it's so necessary to share data in a bigger point, that to have a bigger focus on that.
Yep. Bigger focus on that, Liza?
I guess I already can't really remember pre-Gen AI in like a business sense, right? Which is a good sense. And I guess like what would I want to know is less about like what would I want to know before this wave, but like the next wave, which I think will be the real revolution of how AI is used, going much beyond Gen AI. And the short is probably be prepared.
Right. And Ole?
I think it's a difficult question. I think my best answer would be I would have liked to know when it explodes, because I've been working with it and focusing on for many years.
Yeah.
So I would have invested in Nvidia stock earlier.
All right. So invested in NVIDIA stock earlier. Very good. It's good to close with some humor. You've been tuned into the basically 1 hour session where we've been exploring whether AI should be open or closed. We've had some great questions from our audience of hackers here at BlocksUp in Copenhagen. We're going to wrap up now. Just ask you all to I'm going to ask you to stand up. It's been a bit of a tour de force. And basically put your hands together from Ole from Contact Lab. Liza from Pathways AI, Nikolaus from Paul Smith, Kammeradvokaten, and last but not least, Daniel from Kobe. Thank you very much. My name is Michael Ambjørn, and we'll be back actually later on today with another panel where we put a few mentors on stage to hear about how you can get backing for your idea. And actually one of them is just there, Karina, if you want to talk to her. But actually, I do encourage you to seek out the panel. They are experts. They can help answer all the questions you were too afraid to ask in public. Thank you.
And to supplement that, Michael, just for a quick note, I have brought this small champagne for Molio and Kobe to celebrate your great results for today. This is from Champagne-kælderen. It's just a little recognition. Please do make sure to enjoy this while looking at the next hackathon sessions here. Tech Talk. Be ready for the program. Black microphone program.
Ja, jeg troede, du ville gå ind. Yes. Tak. I lige måde, Nick. Ja. Og tak fordi du...
Okay. Check. Okay, thank you to Kovi and Molio for this great session. We'll take 5 minutes break before we go directly live with RIB software featuring Matthew Jackson, strategy of RIB. We had a small problem here. Stig Brink from Nears was actually sick and couldn't make it today. What we have decided to do is that we will host a small podcast also with RIB software. So be around for the next hour together with us and RIB after a 5-minute break. It's about time that we are ready with the next piece of content here for the Tech Talks. So please join us, please join us. Next up is Matthew Jackson from RIB Software with a Tech Talk inspired about trying to convey the message of the impact of technology in construction. And I just want to share with you that we had this Nero's Tech Talk afterwards, but actually I've made an agreement with Matthew that you will take this spot, given that they are not able to make it today. And we will do this small podcast. We need your guys' help. It's important. We didn't have too much time to plan this, so it's important for us that you'll help us out with being flexible around the shift in between those. So, without further ado, I will introduce you, Matthew, and please step onto the stage and make the best of it. You have the microphone. Yes.
Yep, I think so. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. So the session after this, we're going to do a live podcast panel debate where we will be asking the audience questions as well. So do stick around. We'll have a little shift of time. So I'm going to talk to you about really the impact of technology into an industry. I'm a massive technology geek, but I'm not actually that technical as a person. I can't code. I don't really understand how you build a product in any way, shape, or form or detail, but I understand impact. So impact is basically what I'm going to talk about. Standard little disclaimer, like we're going to talk about some broad subjects, some opinions. So, I have to always put this up. So there's kind of three areas I sort of want to go through. I want to look at macroeconomics, which is a subject we hear a lot about from organizations like McKinsey, but I want to kind of really discuss how macroeconomics is kind of affecting construction. Why are these things happening? And then at the end, kind of like, how do we actually make positive impact and positive change? We have a clicker.
You have a clicker and you take this one?
Oh, don't crash my laptop.
I will try not to. Give it a second and it should be ready.
So somebody stole the clicker last time. So let's see if this will work. Whoa, it works. Didn't crash. All right, cool. So macroeconomic trends. How does big things in the world affect the stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis? I'm going to have a look at a construction lens view on it. One of the first ones is mass urbanization. So what is mass urbanization? Well, it's of course linked to how the population of the Earth is growing, but specifically how we live as people. So basically from post-Second World War to now, people who live in rural areas, so farming, agriculture, out in the wild, out in the countryside, and people who live in larger towns and cities has been growing kind of semi-equally until now. For the first time ever, from 2020 to 2050, the percentage of global population that will live in rural areas will actually fall, while as a population globally, we will grow. And what does that mean? From now till 2050, we have to house in cities 1.5 million people per week, on average, globally. Now, if you think about the size of Copenhagen, it's about a Copenhagen a week, on average, has to be constructed. And with that, all the utilities, the power, the schools, the hospitals, the water, everything has to be built with it. So not just the houses themselves. And this has been confirmed by the UN. This is what we're seeing. So that is the first huge issue and challenge for construction. How do we house 1.5 million people a week with utilities in a world which is more expensive and we have resource scarcity? The second major issue we're having, labor and skills shortages across the industry. Last year in the US, the Association of General Contractors brought in 350,000 new employees into construction. It's a lot of people. But they were still missing 350,000 people. For the first time ever, the industry only met 50% of its required staffing needs. And within our existing staffing needs across the industry, not just in construction, but in architecture and engineering, we are missing huge sets of skills, especially around technology. especially around tech. We don't have the skills. So this is common everywhere. The third big macroeconomic trends, how are we going to journey to net zero as an industry? The industry produces 12% of all global emissions. It's worse than aviation, it's worse than fashion for new construction. And our existing building stock, 90% of which will exist by 2050, virtually all of it needs to be retrofitted to modern standards. And that produces, the heating and cooling of buildings globally right now produces about 28% of all global emissions. Not just power, how we use that power, how insulated are our buildings. Huge challenge, massive challenge. And finally, all of this kind of really leaves the big issue of we're still really terrible at productivity. Terrible. On average, globally, our productivity increases by about 1%, which is way behind virtually every other industry, including farming. So it's not good at all. And to just kind of drive that, the Australian government and the British government releases really interesting productivity statistics annually. We've been on this BIM journey. I don't know if you guys know about this BIM thing. Quite interesting, right? BIM has been around a while. The Australian industry is now less productive with BIM than it was before, right? Which is insane. I don't know what that tells you about the technology that we're producing as an industry, but we're at a hackathon, guys, so this is a chance to make this a bit better. It's worse. We're touching down at 85%, right? 15% efficiency drop. The UK is not doing so well either. Actually, post-2017, it's basically flat into down. There's some political reasons about that as well, Brexit. But it does also cause issues, right? So our productivity is not so good. And you can kind of wrap it up into kind of, I think, 3 major areas. And this is the major areas of work that I'm doing at RIB, which is how do we look at time, quality, and cost of a construction project? And how are we analyzing this, and how are we making it better? Because it's not talking directly about sustainability. Because if you solve these problems, you solve sustainability. Sustainability is a positive outcome of basically solving construction issues across the productivity line with technology. It's an outcome. Of course, you can look at it directly from like materials and stuff, but most of it is going to be outcome-based. And I think that's a really important way to look at it. So what is happening? I think the easiest way to explain what is happening is looking at a family house. Most of us have holidayed or live in a single family dwelling, a villa, whatever you want to call it. On average, when you build housing, build some lovely family houses, it's all very nice, all very new, we make a lot of waste. For every 3 or 4 houses we build, we throw one away from a material volume perspective and a time perspective, right? That is insane. Imagine if Volkswagen, every 4 cars they built, they threw one away. That company would go bust, right? No other industry in the world has this level of wastage. None. It's unfathomable to manufacturing, unfathomable to fashion, unfathomable to cars. But on average, this is globally what it is. We basically throw a house away, which is just mad, right? Absolutely mad. So then you're like, okay, interesting, but why? What are the key reasons on why this is happening? Well, it's really simple. We just are really bad at collaborating together. I'm an architect by education for my good and positive roles, because some of you may be engineers. My dad was a mechanical services engineer. I can tell you he was not that happy when I told him when I was younger I wanted to be an architect. He hates architects. They are the bane of his life because they never leave enough space for air conditioning, for plumbing. They put structure in weird places. It doesn't make any sense. And we joke and we're jovial about this, right? But we all have this kind of weird love-hate relationship with each of the disciplines within the industry. And it kind of does come from this. It's this lack of coordination, this lack of collaboration between us. But the problem is, as you saw with the Australian diagram, we've had technology for a while now. In fact, according to Fifth Wall, which is a VC organization in London, we have approximately 52% of all the technology we need in construction to be net zero already. So why aren't we 52% of the way there? So if the technology exists, what is the problem? It's a people problem. And that is, you really have to think about it from a conducting perspective. We as disciplines are violinists, cellists, trombones, trumpets, but we're not tuned. We might be good at our jobs individually and singly. We may be good at playing those instruments, but as an orchestra, we sound flippin' terrible. It's just, we just don't make good music. So we're not conducting ourselves in the right way. And when you think about a construction project, an on-site construction project, on average, 13 companies, 13 disciplines will be on site at any one time. That's the average count, right? And a lot of people outside the industry don't really kind of get this. Construction is not a linear process. When we start pouring the foundations, the designs for the mechanical and ventilation system is not finished. It's not done. It's not finished yet. You know, at the top here, we have sky pouring, so the kind of a moving slab pouring. So we're pouring concrete up the top while we're installing windows in the middle, while we're doing internal fit out down the bottom. It is a complicated process to get this right. And if you look at the site around it, you can see all these piles of materials and things arriving and leaving and stuff getting wet and dirty and broken. On average, a product, you know, could be as simple as a chair, could be a light fitting, could be that sprinkler system right there, will move 7 times around a building site before it's installed. During those 7 times, it gets lost, misplaced, broken, stolen. Don't think these things don't happen. Even here in Denmark, you guys aren't that well behaved too. All right? You know, these are the things that happen. It's a very complicated thing to coordinate. So tech might be one thing, but you have to think about the people that are on here doing the work. All they want to do is get in, if it's raining, get home and get back to their families, right? That's what people want to do, right? So that's really one of the major problems, and it causes real stupidity, right? Real stupidity. Whose fault is this? Technically speaking, that staircase is exactly how this has been drawn through the section line through the staircase, right? And legally, in a court of law, no one's going to get the blame, amazingly, because that's what the drawing says, right? But the architect will go, well, come on, you can't be that stupid, can you? Well, clearly you can. So, and there's entire websites made up for this stupid mistakes, right? But if you really think about it as a construction industry, which we are, this is waste, this is time, this is cost, this is carbon, right? That's what it all kind of comes down to as well. So kind of where we're trying to get to is that we have a lot of people in a lot of different disciplines. Very skilled individuals by themselves, very good at that instrument they play from the orchestra perspective, right? But right now, we are a mess, still. Well, there's some great technology which exists. Common data environments, BIM process, data pools, and some organizations have implemented this technology, absolutely. But only 44% of architects are using building information modeling still across Europe. And that goes down as you work your way across and down through the supply chain. Down for your engineers, your contractors, your subcontractors, your supply chain of manufacturers. Someone was talking about materials on here before, right? So it's a mess. And kind of the purpose really was we would have this conductor in the middle, this magical BIM thing. And it's kind of worked, but also hasn't solved the big issues yet, right? And that's because I think we called it the wrong thing, first of all. I don't want to publicly blame Autodesk, but I kind of feel I kind of have to, because it was modeling, right? But it should be the middle one. We should be thinking about it as information and information management. That is what we should be thinking about. The 3D part is all cool, yeah, and it looks pretty, and I love a good BIM model that looks really good. But if it doesn't have the information and the management of that information, it's just a pretty 3D picture. Sorry, That's what it is. Well done. You've made a really pretty 3D picture. Like, I know that's harsh, but you really have to think about the information management, because that information is key to understanding how we need to collaborate and work together and communicate. And that's because I think sometimes we kind of forget the basics of what we're trying to do. And the basics of what we're trying to do, or at least what I kind of learned when I first started talking about it, is we need to build it digitally first. And not just from a model perspective, but from a process perspective. Using that data to execute a process of collaboration. How are we going to work it out in a computer, how all those people are going to come together, build something, and then leave and move on to the next job? Right? Because like I said, people just want to arrive on site, do their stuff, get home. And I totally support that way of thinking, because if that's what you want to do, that's fine. It's totally fine. So how do we communicate with those people to do a better job? Very simple. We have to change the way people think. It's about change management. It is about tech, but it's how we use that tech to be smarter. Not in a bad way, but in a good way. And then you have to think about, well, if we were changing people, we're going through this process, what is the end goal? And I quite like it because sometimes we don't hear a lot about this right now. It's no longer the big buzzword, digital twin. The zero carbon digital twin is the absolute end goal. But to be perfectly honest, and this is a personal opinion, I think we're at least a decade away from this, if it's to be done properly. And to give you an example why it's a decade away, let's talk about where digital twins come from. They come from aeroplanes, really. Fundamentally, that's the industry they come from. I've had a fantastic time. I've been sitting and speaking with two gentlemen at IBM who helped Airbus way back in the 90s and early 2000s talk about digital twins for the parts of an aircraft. Makes me feel a little bit safer when you fly, right? Every single element, every single piece in an aircraft has a computerized digital twin to understand how we proactively maintain that aircraft so it doesn't crash with a live data model. It's fascinating what goes on in the background. Boeing do it too. They need to work out how to build their planes properly first, but Boeing do it as well. And that's kind of where it comes from a manufacturing world. So how would you apply that to a physical world? We have a long way to go. We need to collect all the information through the construction process to first of all understand what we've built, because the majority of buildings, take Heathrow Terminal 5, for example, right? They took 10 years to build that. They finished building it. Well done. Congratulations. Here's your new building. Heathrow were like, cool, I'm going to commission a £12 million survey to survey what I've actually got. That is what happened, right? You've just built a building, you've just given it to somebody, and the person's like, cool, I don't trust you, I'm going to go and survey it. This happens all the time. This is super common, right? So then kind of like we're thinking, well, how are we going to start doing predictive analytics of buildings? How are we going to start doing proactive maintenance of buildings to make sure buildings don't go wrong? Because when buildings go wrong, it's not great. Worst case, they catch on fire and fall down. Best case, you have a leaky window that makes it a bit cold, right? So proactively looking after buildings is super key, but it's not possible unless we really work together from a data collaboration point of view. Really great last year at COP28, during the Buildings Day, we had a motion for construction. One of the first specific motions for construction coming out of the COP UN kind of 2 weeks. This was tabled by Morocco, supported by France, and it's the Buildings Breakthrough Act. This kicks off in next week, I think. They're having the first meeting in Paris. This is basically going to instruct governments on how to push the industry to make a more sustainable industry. So luckily, Denmark, you're already on that road. You've been on your 8th year, 9th year of this road. Sweden is also on that road. But I can tell you, a lot of countries are not on that road. This is going to push them onto that road. We're going to make them ask hard questions of an industry that is not ready to answer them. And there's going to be change. And it's for the better. And that change is not just about carbon. That change is about all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Just out of interest, who has not seen this before? And you can be honest. Well, that's good. This is old. This is now 9 years old. And I think I did an exercise with my team at RIB a couple of weeks ago, looking at how our software and our solutions and our processes can actually apply to some of these. And it was a really good 2-hour session. A lot of people hadn't seen these before. And we really looked at how does construction tech, obviously that one is obvious, how does good health and well-being, how do we make buildings apply to zero hunger, no poverty, decent work and economic growth in the construction cycle? These are really important things. This is part of the sustainability. We talk about carbon a lot, right? This is also really, really key. So I've got 5 minutes-ish. So how does collaboration and technology meet? Well, you can be really geeky about it and look at the 1 to 6D processes. Apparently it goes all the way to 9D now. I think someone said there's like a 12D version all the way up. This is enough. 6 is enough in my opinion. And there's like, how do we talk about the 3D we're kind of good at already. This is your Revit model, or ArchiCAD or Vectorworks, whatever BIM software you want to use. It's cool. How do we take a 3D model and how do we start applying it to time? How do we work out how we're going to build this thing in phases with all the people? And how that's going to change as well. Construction changes during the cycle. The amount of change orders, re-estimations, errors that have to be solved, like that is a live, living, breathing thing. How do we apply cost? How do we make sure we keep in time and in budgets? And we never keep in budget, right? So we need to really think about that. How do changes affect the budget? And what's the output? What is the carbon output? And it affects everybody in this cycle. Completely, everyone is involved. So there's 2 ways to look at it, and I'm in Copenhagen, so I have to be careful. There's type 1, huge leaps forward, amazing. Type 2, just don't do stupid stuff, and I'm going to pick on big, and I'm in Copenhagen, and I can, right? This is Björk Ingels Group, fantastic company, right? I know a lot of people that work there. I haven't been to their new offices yet. I'm waiting for an invite. I'm not going to get one after this presentation. This is cool, and this is great, but what does it solve, right? I know what this is for. This is advertising for Björk Ingels Group, and it's fantastic. What things actually solve is looking at buildings as products and manufacturing and factories, and thinking of breaking down buildings into building blocks, Lego, basically. And this is happening really well in Scandinavia, but you see this all the time in Scandinavia, but we really don't see much of it in the rest of the world. How do we build buildings in these phases using a different type of construction process? We see it here all the time. To us, it's normal. It is not normal much out of Scandinavia. I can tell you that now, especially in the US. The other big thing that we need to think about is circularity. How do we build buildings to take them apart? There's been some great hacks here over the past few years around looking at a construction site that is demolishing a building, scanning those parts and using it to build a new building. How do we do that on mass, right? That's a really interesting question. And how are we going to solve the ESG question as well? Again, other industries are already on this road. Apple made that big splash. Oh, the Apple Watch, new watch, no carbon. They did that great video, and it was cool, right? It was good. But that's a watch. Try and do that for a building, right? Hugely, hugely complicated, because most of our carbon comes from the supply chain. 85% comes from the supply chain, right? That's thousands and thousands of companies producing millions and millions of products, right? How are you going to get that EPD data? How are you going to make them understand what an EPD is, Environmental Product Declaration? So understanding carbon, right? Huge. And then finally, which is my final point, because I know that Esker's coming, is how does AI change with that as well? And I know that we're going to have a lot of hacks here around the AI question, and that's super. And what I like about this survey, this was done by McKinsey, is actually the majority of people don't think right now AI is going to reduce their workforce. It's going to increase it from an early adoption perspective. And in construction, I can tell you now, with labor and skills shortage that we have, AI is a must, and it's going to help us build a bigger industry, because we can't have less people working in construction. We need more. So we have to have AI processes in construction. It is absolute, because we have to do so many mundane tasks in construction. AI is going to help us shortcut that and allow skilled humans, because we are, be that sanity check, that human check against it. And that would really help us lift that productivity loss, right? It's going to help us really lift that. And what it will really help us with is this beautifully complicated diagram from a university textbook, which basically means every time we go from architect to engineer to contractor to subcontractor, we lose data a lot. And that's how the mistakes happen. And what we want to do is create that beautiful green line of enrichment and data building as we go with no losses. So in conclusion, seriously, technology is the only sensible step to achieve a productive industry, but it's not about the tech. It is about people, it's about collaborating around common data, and it's about making it a transformation, and not just, I've bought a box of toys, because that will solve nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Before we jump to the next part, Matthew, incredibly important and very interesting presentation you had
Thank
there. Also a very complicated topic, right? And you can dive into it very deeply and research and research and research. So to put this into perspective for our AEC hackers present here at this hackathon, I have an idea. I want to develop a tool or a new hack or something. Where do I start? I need my hack to be compatible with zero emission goals in the future.
Yep.
How do I make sure that this is thought into the process from the beginning? Do you have a simple answer for that?
No.
No.
But it's a good question, because that is exactly the question we're going to try and answer in the next session in the podcast. This is what we want to discuss.
Thank you. So let's take a couple of minutes and we will just quickly mobilize and rearrange the stage area here. We will move this podcast table closer to the stage, and in 2 minutes or so we are ready for the podcast part.
Thank you very much.
Just 2 minutes to get your drinks or whatever you need. Yes, check. So on that note, I will welcome all of you guys to the podcast format. I'm happy that we're able to scramble this together in the AEC Hackathon manner that it is. It is super nice that we could put this small podcast together with this panel featuring Ole Barat from Molio. We have Dimo Lehtinen from KiraHub, Michael Schwartz from RIB Software, together with also you, Matthew Jackson, also from RIB. And we are going to speak a little bit about how would you implement business ideas to create zero carbon outcomes. And that was also the question I had before. So I'm looking into this with a lot of interest, and I'm hoping for some good answers from you guys. Take it away.
Thank you very much. So very much thank you to the AEC Hackathon for allowing us to do this. We don't need to do the intros now because Esker has done them for us. We
Gives us more time.
Jump right in. It's good. And also it's good because literally we had another dropout from this podcast, and literally about 90 seconds ago I asked Timo to jump in. So Timo has about 90 seconds of preparation for this. So I will come to you first. No, I'm joking.
Awesome.
I'm not going to do that. That is mean. So the question of kind of, and it's a question we discuss a lot in these hackathons, right? We have new ideas, there's a lot of new technology that comes up. One of the judging commitments of this hackathon is, can it be implemented on Monday? And I think that is a fascinating kind of idea. But the next question is, how would you implement it on Monday? How do you implement new businesses? So I'm going to jump over to Ole first, because you, at Molio, you guys are doing really some fascinating projects and kind of approaches into kind of really kind of change management and changing businesses. So kind of like, what do you find are those kind of big challenges, and how are you guys kind of approaching to fix those? It's a big question, and it's a big topic.
It is a big topic, and it is a big it is a big question. And I mean, I think something that we are doing is we are experimenting all the way in different ways to do that, because that's we.
Sorry, I think yours is muted.
Yes, awesome. Now I can hear myself as well. Yes. Yeah. So how do we make sure that the industry, or yeah, how do we make sure that that ideas are implemented? We approach it in different ways. We haven't found the script yet. We're still looking for it. I think there are some key elements in it. I mean, there's always a need for somebody who's enthusiastic. There's always somebody who, what's it called, really wants to change something, who wants to change the world, and sometimes that is enough, but often it isn't. Often you need backup from top management. You also might need some what's it called? You need some money. You need some resources to get it done. So we are good at generating ideas. We're also good at working with the specialists, but we are getting better and better also to raise top management awareness of it to help those guys. But we still time and time again see that you have these enthusiasts who's doing a lot of work, but who needs some help, and we can provide some. We can provide technical help. We can come with good advice, but ultimately you need the sponsor and top management, or at least the middle management, who also thinks this is a good idea.
Absolutely, and so it's kind of a mixture of it's not just bottom up.
Yeah.
It's also top down, right? It's that kind of that squeeze. Michael, I mean, you've also worked in the industry for quite some time. Sorry, I made you sound really old then. Sorry, that's not what I meant. You know, kind of working through the industry and kind of seeing where are the common ways to approach these problems. How have you found this implementation question?
Yeah, but it's interesting what you show today about the lack of productivity. We never had, that much technology as we have now.
No.
Never, ever. And to what you said before I answer it, there's a couple of things. Surveys that I've studied is that around 75% of people don't like changes.
Yeah, true.
20%, 15 to 20% understand the need for changes, but they don't want them. So we have the rest now, which is 5 to 10%. that understand the changes and like them and want to implement them. On the other side of the equation, the challenge we have is all the existing projects running where we don't want to make changes. So we want to stay, even, on existing business running in the companies where we would like to implement new technology. So it always means that we can only implement pieces of the new technology, like, for example, driving zero carbon, zero emission, driving sustainability questions on specific small projects or test projects in the beginning before we can roll it out. And that takes years. So the challenge that we have is the top management. Oh, sorry, I was just about to dropping the. Is to get top management to invest in people, education, implementation, and also risk, allowing to be a failure doing it, in order to learn from it to be better on the next project. So how do we actually do that? We do that by finding those individuals that have the desire, because it requires a lot of desire, a lot of energy, a lot of hours, both work hours, but also the expensive hours that you invest into it yourself in order to drive all these changes. Adopting the technology, finding out how can we use it in my business in order to deliver those expected returns on it. That's difficult.
Totally agree. I mean, and I think one of the things I want to pick up there is that cycle time, right? So yeah, okay, we'll go and we've found a new piece of tech or we've found a new process. Let's go test it on a project. So, and that'll be a small project because they want to lower the risk. But that you're not going to get a return, an understanding of any return at all for 3 years. Like that's a long frickin' time.
And the thing is that if you take a large, construction company, general contractor, what is it they're risking? It's the turnover. It's the result of the business that they're risking. And it's only like a 2%, 2.5%, 3% turnover of result they have. That's what they're risking. So we need to find out how can we do that, either find that risk capital that we need to go together with the technology and the tests and the pilots that we want to do. Risk from, owners, project owners, that allow that risk to take place in their projects so we can learn from it. Because we cannot do it right from the beginning. We cannot do it right the first time. We need a number of projects in order to find out what is the right way of doing it.
But it's a big gap, right? I mean, like from where the industry is now and where the industry really needs to be from an operational perspective, especially on the zero carbon question. But that's not just the question, right? The question is how can we ensure we can just deliver projects on time and on budget?
But you can ask the people here to raise their hand if they want it or not.
How
many of you want to have projects on time, on budget?
All of you? I hope it's all of you, right?
How many of you do it?
I mean, but it is one of those things though, where it's like if you don't deliver projects on time and on budget, who pays for it? And the majority of the time is the taxpayer. People forget that, right? Like genuinely, like in our tax packets, there's a lot of money that goes towards the government spending of social infrastructure, and it's a lot of money, like a lot, trillions. Globally per year. So it's also one of those things like we want to do it just so our tax is better spent, just as an individual person on a unique point of view. Over in Finland, you guys at Kira Hub are doing, also you do similar hackathons like this as well, but also run a similar setup as Blocks, right? So you have a lot of people coming to your organization. This is one of the biggest challenges, right, that we all face.
Yeah, I mean, of course, I could kind of follow on what Ole mentioned about the kind of systemic perspective, that you need support from many ways, like funding, these enthusiastic people that really want to change the processes for the better, and then we have also most of the people that don't want to change. So it's actually a systemic challenge, and those challenges are usually the most difficult ones, and definitely we can't change the system at once. So we need to find a way to transform the system bit by bit to a kind of into a new way of working. So that's where we come into play to provide ways to do that, all kinds of activities, programs, projects. Regarding the sustainability and CO2, we are actually running a huge program in Finland called Low Carbon Built Environment Program, where we have 40 million euros of funding from Ministry of the Environment and Business Finland, not just to develop new solutions, but also to boost existing ones in Finland and globally. And that's kind of what we've seen there, is that individual companies actually benefit from having a community of others around them with the same mission, so that they don't have to struggle themselves on this path. So kind of maybe finding that tipping point of increasing the amount of these enthusiastic people that want to change enough so that the system kind of starts to change. And of course the funding helps in that quite a bit. In addition to that, we have started this kind of a sub-ecosystem facilitation on the topic of CO2 Data Hub, where different stakeholders really kind of want to take kind of scope 3 approach of reporting their value chain CO2 emissions and kind of understanding those use cases that haven't been defined that well, but also build capabilities of automating the flow of that data between the stakeholders and not just working manually in Excel and sending those. So that's a group of really enthusiastic people that really want to drive this thing, not just in Finland, but also global level.
Of course.
So those type of processes where we can help and facilitate are, at least I think, one key forward.
I think what I mean I've been enthusiastic person myself for the last 20 years, and also working with other enthusiastic person for almost the same time. I think what is changing now, and what also relates to the zero and carbon, and there's also the biodiversity and all these discussions, is that we add an extra parameter actually makes it a little bit easier, because the thing about time and money is that is something you can always add on top. So you can always get the taxpayer to pay a little bit more. You can always find an investor to pay a little bit more. Maybe someone runs bankrupt, but what's it called? You can renew money. The thing with carbon and the thing with the biodiversity that we are discussing now is that you can't renew that anymore. So we need to do something, and the decision makers in construction are starting to get that. So I think the enthusiastic people's argument gets to change something, to implement technology, gets easier, because we need to do stuff in a different way, especially if we can try to address sustainability and biodiversity, agendas.
Yeah, and at the same time, as I said, we need to change the system, but changing it over time, over one night is impossible. But I think we still need to be faster in changing that, because we are running out of time.
You mentioned the COP28. There were a decision around setting up requirements for housing.
Yes.
Two things that change our industry constantly is money and legislation. So that means if we can have a legislation across Europe, and then secondly across the world, of course, then we have to live up to these legislations. They are going to change our behavior, and that's also going to change the financial flow of money. When we have a legislation that puts requirements on the construction industry, on our industry.
Can we say that is the carrot and the stick?
It is, because I mean it's a pull push. It's a pull push.
Or now what? We had a similar debate in Dublin around this, and they said it's not a stick, it's a baseball bat now. the level of urgency, right? So, but would you get that?
Construction companies are asking for the baseball bat. I think that is interesting.
But let's touch on that. Michael, just finish. I'm going to come back to that point, because I like that point. Michael, just finish your point, and then we'll jump over.
Yeah, it was the money.
Yeah. Okay.
The problem is that the money right now, we have to risk money in order to move forward, and that amount of money we are ready to risk right now is not. You've got 40 million. And we talk, with Niels Falk, about in Denmark, so we can find, 200,000 crowns, and go out and do something. which is not going to change anything.
Doesn't make huge
So
impact.
it's completely different numbers we're looking at. If we can have a stronger legislation that can support those changes, that will also change the way and the structure of the money flow in our industry.
Yeah.
Because right now the structure of the pot of money does not facilitate these changes. Because it still leaves the architect sub-optimizing his economy in a project, the structural engineering company, etc., etc. All of them are sub-optimizing, trying to get the most benefit out of a project. And at the end of the day, really don't care about the other guys, because there's no money for it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, all right, so I've got my baseball bat. It was originally cricket bat, but I had to internationalize this conversation and realize that very few people understand what cricket is. So it's a baseball bat. So I'm government. I have my baseball bat of legislation. You just said you're welcoming my baseball bat, which is quite an interesting statement to make. So expand.
But that is that's the difference between construction currently and farmers. I mean, farmers all over Europe are starting fires and blocking roads and are really, really angry at the government. But actually, the construction companies welcome. I mean, they welcome more legislation. They're actually asking for more legislation. Even even DI Byggeri, which is the Danish trade union or the employers union in Denmark, is saying we need stricter rules. Quite the opposite is it on the farmer side, where they say, oh, we can't do all these CO2 quotas, and I think that is because it's so difficult in construction to change anything. People know actually that it doesn't change because we have this. There's nobody really in charge. We have this value network where people are working together in different constellations. Nobody has a really big market share, so there's not this one player that can change our stuff. Only government, only legislation can make a change that is the same for everybody.
And it goes back to the carrot then, because what we're saying here is that the people who make the legislation actually are the people with the most money that actually comes in to the industry, really. I mean, if you collectively look at how much it costs to build railways and roads and maintain those, then social housing, schools and hospitals and all the utilities around it, most power investments do come from governments. It's not just private money, or at least those private people are paid back by government, right? So the people who are creating the sticks also control the money, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's what it comes down to.
And I mean, I'm glad to hear that it is like that here in Denmark, but I can't say it's the same in Finland. Unfortunately, we do have the foreigner companies that feel the same, but we are in the process of renewing the legislation in Finland that actually comes in force already next year, but it's now on the second round of kind of assessment, because the lobbyists and unions didn't want to kind of push that as hard as it was needed.
But you also have the problem that governments needs to find the lowest denominator in order so they don't exclude businesses from being a part of it.
Which is why Kobe was an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. But you can say, to use your bat analogy, no matter what game you play, why can you play the game? Because you have rules. You have some rules that set how do you play basket, how do you play cricket, how do you play football. Without the rules, who win? You don't know, because you don't count the goals, for example.
Oh, very true.
So we need to have the rules that are setting the scene for how do we play a game, building a building, with all of the different things that are happening in that very, very complex process of all these different players. Whatever it's a orchestra, a football game, everybody has to play their role and do it 200%. So I think there are some things we need to push when it comes to legislation. Sorry, guys, we do need a framework.
Definitely.
Otherwise, we cannot level up this industry. And it's not because the industry don't want it. It's just, excuse me, my friends, fucking difficult when you are in the middle of a project, which most probably is, going down the hill, because most projects are under pressure.
Yeah. And
so that means, where do you find that extra time, to find new ways of working? because the next project you're being set on is also probably going to go down the drain. So it's a challenge. So we need legislation to support us.
So that's so then taking this analogy and moving forward, and then looping back to the question. Actually, so I'm a construction company or whatever role I do, right? New legislation has come in. Could be anything. Could be change to health and safety, fire regulations, carbon reporting, whatever it is, right? I know that I have to start a project next month, and I need to implement something to basically get that result, right? Now, I'm not going to talk about how we do it retrospectively, because to achieve Kobe in a lot of projects, they just get 20 people to fill out a load of spreadsheets manually. Let's talk about how to do things properly. Practically, what is the easiest way to implement a new technology / change in the way we do things? Where would you start? What's your starting position?
I would start with the bonus for the project manager and would make it make it dependent on that he implements that technology.
It's back to money again.
It is, and I think I don't know what's it called. I forgot the name, but there's this Israeli contractor who also has his own venture capital fund, Titar, I think that they are called, and they actually require from the project managers to implement one piece of new technology on each of every project, and that is effective, because it is a project manager who makes the decision anyhow. It's not the CEO, it's not the divisional director, it's a project manager.
I like that. So by the way, so from a project manager, you mean that every project manager has to sequentially add, or as a company they have to sequentially add new technology on every project? How? One is a lot more than the other, obviously. But I mean,
I'm not quite sure what they actually are doing. I was imagining that it was per company, but it might be per project manager. Each project manager has to challenge themselves and use some new technology on their project.
But that might actually lead to sub-optimization on a project level as well, because if you're just looking at from one single company perspective.
But it starts with a management decision.
Yeah, that's come top down. I mean,
it comes top down. The management have made a decision. We want to implement changes into our project execution. One element of that is technology. Another element could be the new legislation. So how do we do that? We need the management to have a strategy for how do we educate our people, how do we implement new technology, how do we implement new structures, how do we implement new legislations into the way that we execute our projects.
And it should be on organizational level, not on a single project level, because there's a life cycle of many projects coming with the same process. So
it's difficult to replicate if you don't have that.
So the struggle is with management decisions, especially top management decisions, especially in contractors, probably not that much in architects, but especially in contractors, the problem is that there's seldom, enough, there's not, I'm missing the word here, there's not enough, they are not enough behind that decision to follow up on the project manager. So it leads always to be the project manager's decision. If he complains, there's no CEO who's saying, I don't fucking care. You need to do that. They will always back out of it. So middle management, project management has a lot of power, even though CEOs, top management thinks this is a good idea.
But that's also back to it's going back to the topic that I discussed before this, which is it's not about the technology actually. It's about what's the business value. I mean, one of the biggest things that I've always advised in the hackathon is that your technology is great, right? But actually, very few people understand technology. Like very, very few. What businesses understand is business value. So that is it a budgetary plus, a time plus, or another metric, however you measure your businesses, right? I mean, that's how people internally need to pitch it, right? It's not about, I've got this really cool tech, it does this thing. It's about the outcome. Would you agree? Like that has to be the approach.
It should, but I mean, in my experience, is that construction companies are not 100% rational actors. So it's not just if you can prove the business value, things will happen.
I think that's a great point, and we actually utilize that. We run also AI accelerator for the construction sector, and there one of the key things is to involve not just the tech people in the process, but also the business people, the C-level guys, and also the operational guys, so that we actually have all the perspectives together, optimizing the solution they are developing. Because sometimes it may actually have a huge cost to implement something technologically, but then the actual benefit is this small.
Yes,
it
the
doesn't
ROI.
make sense at all.
Got to do your return on investment calculations, right?
But also I think the question that goes together with the situation you talk about is that any CEO or senior exec, I mean, I would ask that question also. What is the risk that we take on board by applying this technology? It's a very complex project. You know, it's expensive, cost, you know, associated to the risk. We need to understand that. And sometimes we don't know what the risk is with new technology because we have not tried it before.
So we've run out of time nearly already. I didn't manage to get out to the audience to ask a bit of questions, but I'm going to ask you one question. We have time. We have time for one. Anybody have a? You can. We have two people. You can arm wrestle for it. Actually, no. You put your arms at the same time. Rock, paper, scissors. Right. So after 3, you need to go. So on 1, 2, 3. Ready? Are you gonna play? Right. 1, 2, 3.
And it's a tie, so we'll do 2 people.
Oh my God! Like just embarrassing me. Yeah, you can both do it. For goodness sake, we're hacking the hackathon, right?
A lot of this conversation has been about the legislation and regulations that would dictate these additional maybe burdens on a construction agency, especially considering those 2 to 3% margins you mentioned earlier. But how can we look to potential premiums that contractors and designers, architects, everyone throughout that value chain can implement as a value added where they can actually increase those margins because they're embracing those types of regulations and legislation as opportunities? Is there a place for that alignment that can be accepted by the market?
I like that question. You're limited to 30 seconds to answer each if you want to go.
I mean, my view would be that we need owners that can contractually implement that into their contracts. So they have some benefit programs built into the contract to facilitate, you know, adoption of new technology and new legislation.
KPIs, performance bonuses.
Performance indicators, you know, other things that are being measured throughout the project cycle in order to do that, because everybody's taking on a risk with new legislation and new technology. So we need those owners, you know, to take that part of that risk and reward the stakeholders in the value chain.
I think we need a company leadership that is willing to make decisions on basis of the best for the company and not necessarily for the project, and take more risk on the project because it benefits the company.
Yeah, I think it's a great point on how these kind of changes should be seen as an opportunity to also change the existing business models to be actually better from the premium perspective for these players, because I mean everybody is kind of saying a lot of the kind of bad things about small premiums, but why don't we try to change those? I mean,
yeah, agreed. Yeah. No, good.
Thank you for the question, by the way. And we have another one over here.
It's John from BIM Object. Never a surprise that he always has a question.
Especially when you're on stage. I have a question, also like connected to the legislation question. I guess you're from the States, or so, like I could imagine. But the question here really is also that leads a bit to confusion on my end. I'm from Germany. Do you guys know how many DIN norms there are for building? Do you know that?
No.
Does everyone know what DIN? Can you, for the purpose of the listeners, can you explain what a DIN norm is, please?
Those are the regulations and standards that we have been talking about that you just asked to like put even more in, because we can't apparently get to the objective here without public support. There's 8,000 DIN norms in Germany for like a single-family home. 2,000 of those are directly related to the liability issues that the contractor have. If they figured out how to manage this once, they will never change. No chance. So asking for more regulation and legislation and so on is, in my opinion, crazy. And this is especially crazy thinking that we're in Denmark that has probably the strongest regime of regulation and legislation about environmental concerns in Europe. Like, what has changed? Last year, January, this came into practice, 12 kilograms CO2 per square meter per year. What has happened? Like, you guys have all the tools right now. Like, what is changing? That's kind of my question.
Who wants to go first?
Thank you for the very short question, and please do the answer short as well.
I mean, there's a difference between introducing new DIN norms and actually, as you're saying, making a high-level regulation. And I'm not necessarily advocating that, but I think we should, or actually, yeah. I think what's important is to all the time actually look at that regulation that you're doing. And on the other hand, I think it's also right what the EU is doing with addressing the financial sector and the way that we finance our buildings. So not necessarily put more regulations on the guys that are building the stuff, but put in more regulations on the guys that are investing in it, thereby increasing demand for more sustainable buildings.
We have 30 seconds, gentlemen. You can share it.
I don't think I have anything to add to that.
No, but it's common knowledge that, you know, public in all the regulations we have across, you know, any country is a set of, you know, hurdles we have to get over, and it's hindering us from really being, you know, as, you know, effective as we would like to be, because there's a lot of stuff we need to live up to. So this could also be one of our industry feedbacks to our, you know, to all our, you know, in the public system, that we need to change these, you know, regulations to renovate them and update them so they are more modern, you know, and follow the opportunities that we have instead of being blocks in front of us.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. Actually, we consciously, at least in Finland, we do check when we introduce new regulations, we also check the existing regulations and see whether there's opportunity to get rid of something or make the system more simple in that sense.
So look, gentlemen, thank you. We're over time. Esker's like waving his arms, or will be waving his arms to me very, very shortly. Gentlemen, thank you much for your time.
You're welcome.
Audience, give these people just a quick round of applause. Thank you much.
And I also want to add that we're very happy that RIB Software chose to come here and do this content for us for the hackathon. I hope you guys had fun. We'll have a short break before it goes on again with the panel debate by PropTech. Thank you, guys. And also to Kira Diki and also to Molio for participating here. Thank you, guys. Okay, mic check. So, welcome to the next panel debate. We have with us today PropTech, featuring a nice panel of, Karina Brink, Angel Investor and Startup Mentor. We also have Lars Bonde Lindberg, Angel Investor and Startup Mentor as well. We have Palle Dinesen, founder of, and forgive me if I'm not saying this correctly, Ubiquisence, almost, right? And Lise Sandeman from Pathways AI, the founder of Pathways AI. To do this, to moderate this panel debate, again, you, Mikael Ambjørn from PropTech, take it away, please.
Great. Well, surprise, I'm back. All right, welcome back. This is the 2024 Hackathon at Blocks Hub. We're broadcasting live from Copenhagen, and for the next 25 minutes or so, we're going to have a lot of fun talking about basically how to get backing for your idea. It could be an idea that you are working with inside, maybe an existing company you're working for, or maybe it's a breakout idea that you are looking to take out and actually maybe create a new venture. It could also be a collaboration across industry. There are so many different ways of thinking about ideas and so on. And we basically have gathered an expert panel for you here today. So starting, as Aske briefly mentioned, we are proud to have Karina here. She has a background both as a partner in one of Denmark's leading law firms, and also basically sitting with very large portfolios as one of the leading property companies in Denmark. And not just looking at the portfolios as a whole, but also looking at all the materials that you buy in and so on, which are part of the strategic decision making. I saw recently a data point around the fact that for every million invested in a building when it's new, you actually spend 4 times that on top over the lifetime of the building. So we're not talking about small sums here, so a factor of 4. Next up, we also have Lars Bonde from PropTech Fonden. It's a new microfund, really looking at extremely early stage startups. It's based out of Blocks Hub, sitting in the PropTech Denmark investor corner just over there. He's also actually made his own exit earlier, and brings a lot of practical experience from the construction industry in that context, and also puts in a bit of extra help and effort in supporting the early stage ideas. Don't be afraid to come up and basically ask these two mentors afterwards if there was something that you weren't quite ready to ask during the panel itself. Next up, those of you who tuned in earlier to the discussion around open or closed AI with Contact Lab and Covi, we have Lise back from Pathways AI. She'll talk a little bit more about basically the Silicon Valley approach, right, where you basically pitch deck it first and then build the product afterwards, right? I'm probably simplified it a little bit, but we'll get into that later. And then last but not least, the proud long-time resident in the PropTech Lab here at Blocks Hub, Palle Dinesen, the CEO of Ubiquisence, and you've actually now grown so much that you've actually grown out of this space. So we also love to hear your kind of reflections on the implications as an idea grows, and also the different approaches that you've used to get backing for your ideas. To start us off, let's basically go around the table just briefly and hear from each one of you. First of all, if you think of yourself as mentors, when people come to you with an idea that they want backing for, what are the 1 or 2 things that you wish that people had thought about before they asked you? Do you want to start, Karina?
Stakeholder management. Because often I have seen so many good products, but you haven't in your pitch thought about how to convince the decision maker. So maybe your product is really, really good for solving a problem, but often it comes to the person who has to make the decision and what's in it for me. So when you do your pitch, please also think about that the decision maker is also just the person who's really busy. So why should the person run with your idea and not someone else's idea?
Yeah, to build on top of that, very much the old one, pain and gain. You know, just which pain are you solving here, and who will gain for it? You know, it's a little bit on top of you saying, Karina. Yeah, try to have a look at it. And it's also very nice if there is some kind of business into it, right? It's just that we need some kind of of income. In the next thing could be team. Try to look at your team and your competences. That is something that is most difficult to change.
All right, so what we're hearing basically is that before people come to you, think about basically who are the people involved, what is the pain experienced, what keeps people awake at night basically, and what's the gain that can be realized, and within that, very importantly, who are the humans to actually carry out the work, right? Or maybe it's an AI, I don't know, Liza, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess short for those who weren't here earlier, co-founder of Pathways, we have a platform that we sell to material manufacturers that help them reduce the environmental footprint and biodiversity impacts of their products and also report on it, very importantly. And I guess for this context, where I've been kind of framed as Silicon Valley type venture-backed startup, I think the important thing to think about with your idea is what will make this idea you have or this product or this project you have successful? Right, and for some, that's not taking on any money, it's kind of slowly growing. For us, we knew that we needed a lot of data and that initially our product would be quite expensive to build and we wouldn't be able to ask our customers to pay a lot for it because it wasn't very good yet, right? So that premise of the pain point, the problem and the stakeholders automatically led down to a route where in order to build this type of business, wanted to take on venture funding. So back in December, raised $2.5 million, which is our first funding round to really launch and scale and be able to get the type of talent we need for this. So that's the context.
So what I'm kind of hearing is often when you talk to engineers, they kind of look at oats one at a time. It's really good for billing. You can solve the problem one at a time. Also in construction, you build one wall at a time. But what you're inviting is basically, can you do many at a time? Can you make it scale, right? Is part of the success, basically making it kind of almost take off by itself. Pelle, talk to us a little bit more about basically your take.
Yeah. So assuming that you got the product market fit right and you got the perfect product for it, think about the team. So that's why I've struggled the most in the 8 years since I founded Ubix, getting the right team in place. And I have to say, in particular, you may have the best product in the world, but you need the right people to sell it. And sales is, for me, the most challenging part on the whole journey. Getting the right salespeople on board to actually go out and sell it. We all think it's really easy because we have the most fantastic product. We love to talk about it, but sales is a lot more than that. And that is where you'll find, in my experience, the largest challenge, getting the right people to do sales for you.
Great. Okay, so you've now met our expert panel. Maybe I should briefly add, I'm Michael Ambjorn from PropTech Denmark. We're an association with about just over 200 members across the built environment, a lot of the pension funds, the people who basically own, operate the buildings that we live in. You're all super users of buildings, and you probably spend 9 out of every 10 hours in a building. In fact, during the AEC Hackathon, maybe you're spending 24 out of 24 hours in a building. And it really is something that we invite you to really think about, the fact that it is not just the world's asset class, it's also one that has a huge impact on your daily life and actually an impact on a pension if you hope to have one eventually. In amongst those members are, of course, not just pension funds. There are also a bunch of startups, investors, and other stakeholders, back to Karina's point there. But what we invite you to do in this very brief session is to basically come with the questions you have around a particular idea that you're trying to get backing for. So at this point, I'm basically going to try and open up to the audience and see what happens, and see if we can maybe get a question around an idea that you've tried to get backing for. Is there anybody here who... Yes? Well, we're just going to secure a microphone because we are broadcasting live on the interweb. So just for the benefit of the listeners out there, we look amazing. Comes as called, man in a hoodie. Thank you very much. And this is also a good opportunity to say thank you to the technical team here. Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I've forgotten your name, but question to you.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how in the early days you were able to sort of convince people of the value, the future value of the data that you were capturing?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say to kind of the first point we got here, which was sales is the most important function, right? Like the founders, whoever is coming up with this idea is the first salespeople, and they will forever be the core salespeople, right? Which means that more than anything, particularly when it comes to capturing data, and we're ingesting material manufacturers, which is like not a sexy sector. It's like cement, steel, hard-pressed wood, right? They're unstructured invoices. Like, people are sleeping by the time I've already said those things, right? So making it clear why is capturing all those unstructured invoices, what's the value we can bring from that, that's the storytelling element.
Was it storytelling rather than a clear monetization strategy around that data?
Yeah. I mean, there's a long pitch deck and a bunch of work around it. But before we went out to raise our round, we had signed our first customer, a multi-billion-dollar material manufacturer who had bought a pilot for a product that didn't exist yet, right? A real stakeholder, a real buyer with a budget, who thought that just, frankly, our story about what this product would be able to do was so valuable that she was willing to pay up front, right? So like that is a data point for monetization strategy. It's one, right? And then the story to investors is then, well, this is one data point, but it will become all these different data points. But no, you do need stuff. Like, I don't believe that, I mean, especially not in this funding environment, that you can come in with like 5 pages and a good idea and get funding. I'd spoken to maybe 70 material manufacturers before even trying to go out and speak with investors.
And can I just pick up on one point here, because just from a part of the driver here, if I'm not mistaken, is probably not, I don't know the manufacturer in specific, that they were driven actually in the first instance by gain. I think their legal department has sat down with them most likely and talked about EU regulation and the need to comply, and then they're kind of going like, how are we going to do this? Amongst our membership, we also have people who work in construction, and it is now becoming the norm that if you basically can't declare everything that is in something coming into a building site, it's not coming into the building site. And that's a great motivator if you are a supplier. Basically, if you lose your big customers overnight, then you're motivated to change, I think you could say, right? Would you agree that the regulatory element is an increasing driver in this area?
Yeah. I also had the responsibility of ESG in the department, and before I think 5 years ago, if you want to buy a product, you want, as you said, look at what can I get from implementing the product into my company. But today you both look at how to gain, but also how to minimize risk, also risk on your property. So the property is worth 200 million today, but how does it look in 5 years when there's new
regulations?
Yeah, regulations. And then the last part is all the environmental part, all the ESG. So now you look at 3 different matters when you want to buy a product, and you need to, in your pitch, to tell the story for all 3.
And actually that speaks to the theme of this hackathon, right? So basically navigating the triple transition. Pelle has something to add here?
I want to come back to what you said about selling, because you're right, the founder is the best salesperson for the company. The problem is it doesn't scale.
Yeah.
So once I couldn't, for years, I couldn't understand why did I have to go out with the salespeople I hired, and I would do the final sales. And then, you know, because I knew everything, and the problem is that to get good salespeople to scale this, it's a totally different breed typically than yourself. So it's really difficult to understand salespeople. And so as a founder, I'm a very technical person. I love product. You know, I can evangelize my product from now on until forever. But it's a different craftsmanship. Sometimes it's an art form to be in sales, and I think that's really, really important to understand that you can as a founder sell to a certain level, but it doesn't scale after that, and that's the challenging part. That was for me the challenging part.
That's really interesting. So let's in the audience here, who would consider themselves a salesperson? Yeah, one person. Great. Okay. Ask it, sort of ish. Yeah. Okay. How many would consider themselves an engineer? Yeah. Architect. Yeah, okay. And something else. Something else. Great, okay. So, who pays your salary at the end of the month? You do, yeah, good. All right, congratulations, by the way. But most of you are paying your own salary through the work that you do, right? So you are actually, whether you're conscious of it or not, you are actively selling every day, right? If nothing else, just to maintain your regular paycheck. But it is a sort of slightly scary in an engineering environment to talk about the need to sell, because it's not on the exam at the DTU, the Danish Technical University, as far as I'm aware, right? Great. Let's see if we have any more. But by the way, did that answer your question before? Yes, it is. Thank you. Yeah. And maybe just briefly reveal who you are, if that's okay for the panel. That would be helpful.
Yeah, hi, my name is Brian. I'm an architect and recently began the journey on building my own startup. So it's very much in its infancy. My question is, at what point in the process are you ready for seeking out investment? So developing a pitch deck, is there benchmarks or a final benchmark, or where should you get to where you know you're ready to start to go out to investment or seek investments?
All right, who wants to?
Yeah, well, to some extent, you know, if you have a good idea and basically a nice team, because we are very much looking as investors, looking into more people in the founder team, the better, or at least 2 or 3, something to do that, and special competence and different competences, right? As we talked about before, some sales competence is also very nice. And that is much more important for us than the great idea. Yeah. It can be very simple, something like that. Start with that. And then some advice on soft funding, so you don't have to bootstrap everything on pizza and Coke. You know, it's just so try to get foot of some kind of soft funding. In Denmark, there's a very nice milieu for that, and that will give you maybe the first million or something like that, and then you have something to show to potential customers, right? That's a path that we can see that's followed by many and successful by a great part.
All right, that's really good. So we just got a few footnotes here, because there's a language in venture which sometimes can be a little bit confusing. So soft funding, to be clear, is funding that doesn't necessarily have to be paid back. So it could be, for example, from a government grant or a philanthropic grant or something like that. Examples are Innovationsfonden in Denmark, or Innovation to Market, Innovation to Market, which is a Realdania-backed program. There are many more. You can come and talk to us about it afterwards. Yes, sorry.
And then maybe also think of advisors not only very expensive, but also a helping hand. I think in my time as a legal advice, I was at Plessner 10 years. No one ever called me asking, I have an idea. What do you think about, will that fit into the real estate in Denmark? And if someone had called me, I know there's a lot of other legal advisors who said, oh, that sounds great, come for a lunch and we can talk about it. And then you will have maybe half an hour for free legal advice. And the benefit for the legal advisor is to understand where's the trends, where are we moving. So they're also interested in. So don't be afraid reaching out. The worst can happen is a no.
Yeah.
Or we don't have time. But there is many advisors who are so interested in their particular industry or area. We are geeks with another hat on. So try them out, because they can open network for you. They can explain what you have to think about in an early stage, and you don't have to have long legal memos or financial memos or things like that. Maybe
just to quickly build on that there is a data point around the fact that startups that are able to work well with advisors go on to have a factor of 2 or 3 more effect over time. with the lawyers, and with all respect, do always qualify if this is billable or not. Just be super explicit.
Yeah.
Just say, is this billable or not, right? That, just to avoid any confusion. Or go through an association like ours, which offers expert office hours, which I can guarantee you are not billable for any party. Liza.
Yeah, I mean, first off, congratulations, right? Even like, what's a year and a half ago, we were at the infancy of our idea. Now we have funding, a team, and paying customers using a product that's like live, sometimes crashing, but live, right? So I mean, I think that's where everything starts. I think two different parts to it. It's like, it's all about stages, right? So break down, what do you need to get that first kind of bucket of money that can fuel you to your next stage, right? And again, if the kind of idea you are thinking of, or the kind of product or what you're doing requires capital upfront before being at its full effect, you are going to need to seek external capital, right? But when you think of the very first stages, I mean, we got, and this is all in dollars, around $200,000, which is kind of equivalent to the million and a half Danish kroners, on very, very little, right? That then got us enough that we could kind of get off the ground, prove a few points, get a customer who was excited enough, and getting them paying was a big enough value point that then we thought, okay, now we are ready to go out to much more established venture funds. So thinking about it in stages is really the way to do it. Don't think about what do you need to get to the full scale. Just break it down and be like, what do I need to get to the next half year? And then, now my circles are more like 2 years, but initially it was 3 months. And then at one point on advice, it's like, you ask for money, you get advice. You ask for advice, you get money, right? So just think about how you frame and who you look for. Asking for advice and a cup of coffee with groups do angel investing is always a great way for them to start understanding how you think. And I mean, insert exhibit 1 and 2.
Exactly.
Maybe something to add. And then always, so my co-founder and chairman of the board, I've worked with him for 23 years in multiple companies. He always says, seeing and believing. Seeing is believing, and I always hated him for saying that early on, because I could explain everything, endlessly, and why couldn't he just understand that this was the most brilliant idea? And he's like, you need to go build something and show me. And I have to say that he's right. If you have something to show, that's a lot. That is a lot easier than explaining in a very long PowerPoint or however you're going to do it.
Very good. We have time for maybe one, maximum 2 more questions. We, for some reason, in all the panels today, have a bias towards this side of the room, so I'm going to insist on one question from this side later, but maybe 2 questions. So one for the people who are ahead, and then for the people catching up, right?
And please remember to introduce yourself quickly.
Yeah.
Nick Catania with Climate Point. We do impact. We help impact advisors with Scope 4 avoided emissions. How do each of you value impact? And the more tangible you could be, I think the more beneficial this can be for the audience, whether it's CSRD, SFDR regulations, taxonomy, premiums. What is that value in your own business model activities?
Great. That invites a super brief answer, if possible, ideally with a practical example. And then we can tee up the next question over here. Excellent. All right.
Can I kick us
Liza?
off?
Yeah.
Like, there is so much chat about measurement and how do we compare different measurements, and like even all the acronyms you just listed off, I'm sure half the room doesn't know what they mean, right? Like, real impact is real reduction. Like in our business, impact is when a manufacturer has taken action and reduced either a variation of chemicals that results in biodiversity loss, or actually changed parts of their product in terms of carbon footprint. Like, it's actual reduction, not advice on measurements.
All right. That's a powerful statement, right? So,
well, basically, I couldn't agree more. But sometimes I also see SaaS companies that actually have a possibility to measure differences within the carbon footprint and something like that, and they also make a difference. But there's a close line to what we can call greenwashing or whatever, something like that, when we come into the measurement industry, something like that. Yeah, but we don't do investment without an impact.
All right. I'll just quickly add that the construction industry is a little bit digitized, and the real estate industry is really not digitized as much as you would expect. So in some cases, there is still impact in simply getting data in the first case. But ultimately, what we want is actually a change.
Our business is data.
Yes.
But it's like if they don't take, if no one takes action of that data,
Yes, then
you've
it's
had
pointless.
no impact.
Exactly. Right. Anything to add?
No,
Pelle?
I totally agree. Yeah.
I'd say based on experience, the real estate industry is super conservative, and so you may well have significant impact, but in the real estate, it's still a lot about the money. You know, if you can show them the savings and all of that, you know, that's the way to get in there, and then you might possibly have an impact, but it barely sells. Or there's regulation that's going to force them to do something. That's going to help.
Or the transition risk.
Yeah.
That
exactly.
I think that's the new subject.
Yeah. Okay, so a little bit of Tom Cruise there with Show Me the Money. Excellent. And the last question for today. Do we have any takers over here? Oh, we're all looking very careful here. All right. Maybe. Yeah, excellent.
Hi. I'm Anna. I work at Ramble. And I'm here hacking today. But what do you guys think about investing in new startups that maybe don't fall completely into the industry that you're usually working in? Maybe they have one leg in the industry and one leg in a completely different industry.
Great. All right. Any thoughts? Who wants to start?
I really like it because if you look at companies with very much success, they often combine two different parts and make a third thing. So I think I need to get inspired. I'm in the real estate industry, and if we have to move something further, we need to get inspired from other industries. And so I think it's perfect if you have a combination.
Yeah.
Very short. As an investor, we always look at do this company is only a single product, right? That's never good because something can happen. So we always look into multiple products within the startup, and it's good if something is to another industry.
Yeah.
Perfect.
But Liza, isn't that the difference between Denmark and the US? Because I think in the US, you know, they love to invest in very narrow products because they like to take a higher risk than people in Denmark do.
I guess one for context, the majority of my investors are American. Right. Not the whole investor base, but it is representative. I think I have two different points, and I guess they're from like a founder perspective. Like most of my investors, we kind of cross industries in some perspective, right? So they're either like construction property investors, like very prop tech focused, but like really couldn't tell me anything about life cycle analysis, right? They're like, sounds interesting and kind of environmental. Or you have people who like understand the climate and they're like, oh, wonder how many materials there are. And I'm like, well, look around. Where do you think the materials came from, right? So I think that's kind of an example. One thing I would say, though, is I see a lot of really good ideas that aren't focused. And when you say something that goes to multiple industries, I'd say solve a really clear pain point for someone, and it needs to be a person who can also pay. And then the fact, if what you're building has opportunities to scale across multiple industries, that's great, but you do need to start somewhere, right? And I think a lot of people start really broad instead of focusing on doing something real.
All right, I think that's a good point actually to start wrapping up. So we basically looked at how to get backing. We've covered a little bit about soft funding. We talked about basically venture funding as well. We talked about working with founders going way back, and actually through multiple ventures, we've drawn on the experience of basically thinking of the, can I call it the American way or the Silicon Valley way versus some of the approaches that we may be more used to here in Denmark. This has been really helpful and a good learning experience, and we would like that to continue. So we actually, the panel will be available immediately afterwards to come up and ask additional questions. My colleague Lucas is also here. He's also a very helpful chap. So come and find us afterwards and we can talk more. But for now, this is the 2024 Hackathon at BlocksHub, looking at the triple transition and in this context of how you can get backing for your idea. Thank you to the panel. Please stand up and give them a round hand. Thank you to Karina, thank you to Lars, thank you to Liza, and thank you to Pelle.
And also to make a short supplement, thank you to PropTech for bringing very intelligent and bright people on the panel today. It has been a real pleasure to see you, and I hope that you also enjoyed it on the stream. Remember, guys, that you can see this recording again and again and again and again, and that will be important on your startup journey. So I'm looking forward to hear your feedback from that as well. So thank you, PropTech. Here you go.
you. All right.
And I want to say, guys, for the next 10-15 minutes-ish, mix, network, LinkedIn, connect, do whatever it takes to get in touch and make the best of it. Okay?
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay. Check. So we are ready with the next point on the program. Together with me on stage, I have Max Cederkreuz of Setopo, the founder, the chairman, and I think I actually wrote CEO in the description, but
close enough.
That's just startup confusion. Sorry, that's my mistake.
No worries.
Max will take us through his story, the history of your startup, to continue that concept of this hackathon, speaking about how you take your idea and develop it into something that is actually out there doing its thing. So without further ado, I will hand the microphone to you, and you're on from here. Thank you.
All right, I expect you can hear me probably and everything. No mic. No mic. No mic. Mic? Okay, now we have a mic. Right, so hi everyone. My name is Max Cederkreuz. I'm the founder of Setopo, as Oskar said. And so this is a hackathon, right? And I've been to a number of hackathons before I started my startup. So what I would like to talk about today is basically how you can maybe think of going from a hackathon to a startup. How can that work? So it's a bit different than just starting a startup directly, but I think it's a viable path to go through. So some backgrounds about hackathons, and then a little bit about Setopo and my journey there, and then about how all of that maybe relates to your hackathon that you're attending here today. And of course, as a side note, if you happen to be an architect, then I hope you'll also find what I talk about Setopo itself very interesting, because architects are the customers of Setopo pretty much. Right, so I would like to congratulate all of you for attending this hackathon. I really enjoy hackathons, and I think they're a great way to learn new things, to experiment with different ideas, to meet new people, and sometimes also to compete for exciting prizes. At the first hackathon I attended, called Code It in 2014, I was told what the hacking mindset is, and I would like to share it because I think it was a pretty nice presentation. So in the words of the man on the screen there, Giorgio Moroder, the father of disco, if you let go of the concept of harmony and music being correct, you can do whatever you want. And the presenter, Tony Strandell, here has added a bit of hackathon flair to the quote. But basically the idea here is that there's not much point coming to a hackathon and doing what we're all very good at, what we're doing in our day-to-day jobs, but of course we should do other things here, and by meeting new people we can then, and thinking a bit outside the box, we can then experiment with new things. Most of them will not amount to much, but sometimes something fantastic gets discovered there. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now, Code It was pretty much a coding competition, so not like this hackathon and pretty much all the other hackathons I've attended later, which are product and solution focused, kind of like more business oriented. And I think this business oriented or solution focus is very nice, because if you have a business idea or some kind of solution in mind, you can come to a hackathon like this and use it to try it out, to use it like an MVP experiment, or just to try something out that you maybe wouldn't want to waste a day at work for, or maybe you don't have time to do that. That's one part of it. But you can also come here with no idea in mind, and you're kind of forced into thinking a little bit, not just about coding, but about the solution and the problem that you're trying to solve. And the nice upside of this is that you maybe during the event or maybe after the event, you realize that there was some potential in the thing that you did there. So it's not just a little hack that you do, but you end up actually kind of inventing something valuable. And not always, of course, but sometimes. And I think what I've seen, everyone's doing software-related things, and that's of course perfect for this inventing things, because it doesn't take huge risks or huge investments or anything like this. You can just make it. If you have the required skills and the required attitude, you can make something that is truly valuable without sinking huge amounts of money into it. And about the skills and attitude, I think if you are here at this event today, you probably have both. Otherwise, well, you wouldn't probably be here. Now, Setopo was not conceived at the hackathon, but it very well could have been, I think. If there happened to be an AEC hackathon in Helsinki during the right time, and I would have attended it, I think the first steps towards what Setopo is today could have been taken at the hackathon very, very easily. Now, before I go into too much detail about the past, I'm going to quickly show what Setopo is today, so you know what I'm talking about later. Let's hope this works. Yes, right. So Setopo is a web service where architects would go, oh, does it play? Yes, it works. So Setopo is a web service, as I said, where architects would go and download 3D landscape models. And now I have to time my speech to the video. There we go. Right. So in Setopo, you would go just somewhere in the country that you're interested in, for example, this island. And then you would select an area there, like so, and pretty much instantly get access to the 3D landscape model at that site. So here we have the terrain, buildings, trees, properties, orthophoto. And all this is based on land surveys, municipal data sets, environment agency data, that kind of stuff. And it's all generated according to your specifications, so it's not like a fixed model, but it can be tailored to your needs. I'm going to show here larger models, because I like large models. I think the largest model someone has downloaded from Setopo is about 20 square kilometers, and you can bring that into like BIM software, so I think that's pretty cool. Here we have the entire island in a bit lower resolution, but still, I think you have quite a lot of detail here. Now, of course, 3D previews in a browser like this are cool, and you can use them for communication, but the main product is that you can download this into your software, so into Revit, ArchiCAD, SketchUp, Rhino, whatever you are using. That's probably what I'm going to show next. Yes, selecting the right coordinate system. We want to be geo-referenced, don't we? Right from the get-go. It's computing the model here for us. I tried to take a place in Denmark, but I think this is actually a Swedish island. All right, but there we bring forth Revit, and we have a plugin there. You choose the correct settings, and then we have to wait a few seconds, and we get the model. And the process would be pretty much exactly the same in ArchiCAD as well, if that's what you are using. whatever. There we go. We have a model, 3D model, with all of the same details that was just shown in the browser in Revit. Right, so the point here is that our customers would be able to get started with their projects as well as possible, as quickly as possible, right from day one, without having to, pay some engineer to go measure the site or something like this. And by having all the data in one place, of course, we can save time for the customer, but more importantly, or maybe not more, but at least very importantly, we can combine those data as well to create stuff that you won't be able to get anywhere else, like the trees in these models and the buildings. We compute them from the different data sources. Right, but with that in mind, let's continue, step back, and look at the early history and how that relates maybe to your hackathon today. So, long ago, I was working on a project completely unrelated to setup of that, where I got to use the 3D terrain information in Finland from the land survey there, and I was very impressed by the quality and wide availability of the data. And I happen to also have parents who are architects, and I happen to also know that they don't use this data, but instead they would contract some engineer or surveyor to go to the site and survey it manually. This would take time and it would be expensive. So I asked my parents why they don't use this data. And the answer was that they didn't know it existed, and after some discussion, actually, even if they had known, they wouldn't have been able to use it because you don't bring an ASCII model into Revit. At least you wouldn't back then. So, being a coder, I decided to code something that I could convert this data to my parents, and that's what I did. And so I sent a few DXFs over to them that had something like this in it, and asked what they think of it, and they thought it was amazing, and they would love to have some more of that. Well, I think it doesn't take any huge changes to this story to make it fit into like a hackathon setting. So the idea could have been invented at a hackathon, my parents could be replaced by a jury, and actually I think juries at hackathons are typically a little bit more objective than parents when it comes to like product feedback, so that's kind of an upside as well, although then you get maybe negative feedback as well, which maybe not the nicest to get. But yeah, many of the solutions I've seen here today touring the teams have been for sure more sophisticated than an ASCII to DXF converter. So definitely there is potential in your ideas. So the relevant bit then, the only question that remains is whether you continue with what you produce here today or not. And in my case, yes, I did, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be here today. And so I got really excited about the potential of this. So I decided to try to think about how to make it into like a little side business of some kind. Didn't have any huge ambitions at that time, but something at least. Right. So the model I had in mind then was that customers would send me an email, and I would email them back a model and a bill. And surprisingly, I did manage to sell a few DXFs this way, and I even got requested once to print the DXF onto a paper and mail it physically to the customer. So not very software-y, but that was kind of cool. But actually, yeah, getting some money this way really confirmed to me and cemented my belief that this is a product that somebody wants, that there could be potential for much more here. Right, well, various experiments and turns and things later, it was 2020, and Setopo was founded. But not alone. I was cognizant of being in the high-risk group of engineers who might be tempted to believe that the product will just magically sell itself. And so as a vaccine, I also found a more business-minded co-founder, Thomas, not here today, and then we founded the company. And yeah, 3 years or 4 years, 3 years, number of new features, a few business models later, and we're now a team of 11, soon 12 amazing people, and we have about 200 paying customers, which are architecture firms mostly. So yeah, that's the history in a nutshell. I think one more. Missed the slide, but here's the team. It's growing. There's the latest picture from our Christmas party. Great. So basically, I warmly recommend that all of you take a good look at what you're hacking here today and thinking whether or not that could become a startup. it might be very tempted, that I've done it many times after a hackathon, just dismiss your thing as being just something for the hackathon, a little not so serious thing. But take a look at it again and see if maybe maybe there could be a startup hiding in the hack somewhere. And nowadays it's so easy with like cloud providers, and there's like fantastic tools and frameworks. I think the next speaker will talk about something like this as well, that you can do these MVPs with pretty much no effort. No, well, I won't say no effort, no risk. If you have the necessary skills and attitude, you can just do it. And as I said earlier, I think most of you, or all of you, probably have this as you're here doing these hacks. And naturally, your MVP doesn't have to have a great business model, in my mind at least. It can be just something, because if you manage to get pretty much anyone to pay anything for your thing, they've already confirmed that there is a client who is willing to pay for the thing, and I think that's all it takes. The same, of course, goes for the product. It doesn't have to be feature complete. It doesn't have to be bug-free or anything really. As long as someone is willing to pay for it, I think that's a great place to start. And I think I want to emphasize here that nowhere in this did I mention financing, because I think it's not necessary to start your journey through the financing, getting investors and all of this. I think nowadays it's quite doable to start a startup without all of that, and then later, if you have the ambition, you can do it. Right. Yeah, so basically, if you do this all and you manage to sell it to someone, you can then later think about how to transform that into like a promising startup and all of that. And as a final side note, if you're a student still and you don't want to start like your next adventure yet, try thinking about, or well, I did at least, wrapping your hack thing solution into your thesis or something like that. You can then progress both things at once, like getting your degree and progressing your startup plan or dream further without like hindering either of them. Okay, I forget to click this thing. Right, so as a summary, Setopo makes 3D landscape models, and please give your hack a chance and make an MVP of it. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Before we finalize it completely, do we have time for one quick question?
Sure.
So I was wondering, Max, when in this process do you know that you have validated your technology to become something that you want to take the chance and risk your economy, your personal life, or basing your life on? When did you decide that for your journey here?
I'd answer that by focusing on the word risk your economy, because, for example, in my case, I didn't risk any economy because I was a poor student when I did these decisions, so there wasn't that much risking going on. Yeah, I guess the more economy you're risking, the more convinced you have to be of your product, the value of it, or more passionate you have to be about it. I don't know if that was a good answer, but...
It was an answer, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have any questions here? We have time for one quick question. Yeah?
My name is Benjamin, I'm from Molio. I'm just curious about the process of you're going through related to the question that was just mentioned here. Also, how much research do you do before you sort of invent a prototype or feel convinced about the value of your idea? I don't know if you know familiar with the design thinking double diamond concept. Okay.
No, I was just going to answer this by saying that I don't consider myself having very much experience, this being my first and only startup so far. So I've only done this process once, and it's in my case maybe it was more of like an gradual process. So first getting a little bit of confirmation, then doing a little bit of effort, then getting a little bit more confirmation, then doing a little bit more. So it wasn't like an all or nothing decision at any point in my case. But I think there are probably much more qualified people in the room being able to answer the question with a little bit more experience.
And on that note, that is the beauty of it, that we have a lot of cool people around here. Yes. And remember to reach out to Max to speak about the startup journey and how to start things up. Thank you, Max, for contributing with your beautiful story, and I wish you all the best in the future. Reach out to him, okay? Let's give him a hand.
Thank you. Perfect.
And in 30 seconds, we are starting with the next one. We have Autodesk Forma on board here. So if you step to the stage, Autodesk Forma. It's on its way. Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's all my Googling for the hackathon. Yeah.
One second.
Nice.
Okay, thank you guys, and sorry for the small confusion here. Let's jump on to Autodesk Forma. I'm introducing Martin Norby Johansen to talk a little bit about your MVPs and what you're doing with the technologies. And I just want to add to this that this is the beauty of it, right? We have been through the whole discussion about how to find the investors, how to make sure to nurture your idea and make sure that you are primed and ready to actually do something with it. And we just had a great talk from Setopo about taking it from idea to an actual startup. And we know that Spacemakers has been through a journey to go actually into big business, if I can say so. Big tech could also be an expression. So with that, Martin, please take it away from here.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so my talk is called Extensions Model for Building AEC MVPs. And what does that mean? It's going to be about how we think that our way of adding extensions to our product is a great way to validate your prototypes and then move them further on. Since this is a tech talk and hopefully a lot of people here know tech, I'll dive a bit deeper into how we actually made it happen, not only the big picture and why we do it, because I think that's fun. That's what we do in our team. I also have my colleague Magnus here, who is also a big part of that team, where we try to enable third parties integrating with our products and hopefully can make a profitable business out of it. Okay, I have to show you this slide. It's only because you can't make any purchasing decisions based on this presentation. All right, let's get into it. So I'm not sure how many people here know Forma, but so the 10-second pitch for it is we're an early phase design tool that you can more or less divide into 3 different phases. So we have the project setup, where we provide a lot of real-world contextual data. Not yet Setopo, but hopefully later. And then from the project setup phase, we have the design and automations, where we have some different design capabilities and a few generative design tools as well. From there, you have analyses. These range from wind analyses, detailed noise, and also some surrogate models. And what they do is so we can make real-time analysis to evaluate your designs and then change them instantly instead of having to wait for the detailed analysis to finish all the time. We also have integrations with other products. So for the contextual data, we have S3 and a lot of geographical ones, but also for authoring environments, we have connectors both to our internal products such as Revit and Dynamo, but also Rhino and TestFit, Shapediver, and so forth. And for the analysis platform, we have Veras AI, and I will show you a pretty cool picture later from that, as well as Symmetry, which are making an outdoor area analysis, which is in closed beta, I think, yeah. So Forma right now is at this pretty narrow stage of the AEC industry, or this small part of it. And we want to take it further. We want Forma to be a way for people to connect multiple phases of the design and build environment. So we can't do that ourselves. And we don't think we should do it ourselves because we're not experts on everything. You guys know way more than we do about certain things. We want to enable you to hook it up into our platform, and then we have a visualization framework that can, so you can make use of what we provide and then make it build business on top of it. And then, since we want people to work on Forma, why would you do that? How do you make a good extension framework that people actually want to build on top of, that is fun and provide value very fast? So it should be easy to get started. This is a multi-part on tech side, but also documentation. We should have good tutorials, and it should be very easy to know how few steps to render something on our page or do something with the geometry. It should have a quick feedback loop, and it should be very easy to update. So since we're a cloud product and we're on the web, we have a lot of advantages with continuous deployment, continuous workflow. So since we launched in May, I think we've had around 100 updates, and they happen every day. And that's only product updates. We also have bug fixes and multiple deployments throughout the day that are minor, and you probably won't see them. We should be unopinionated. It shouldn't matter what you build. We don't want to put borders around you. What I mean by that is we provide a tool set, and then what you do with those tools are completely up to you. It's not important that we go to you and say, no, you can't build that, we don't like it. That's completely up to you. And then it kind of ties into the previous one. Your logic is the most important. Your business logic is the most important. We're just an entry point to what you want to build, so you can go into multiple places, such as Revit, ArchiCAD, Rhino, and hopefully Forma as well. And last but not least, you should be able to make some money. Because why wouldn't you? Why would you work for free? Yeah. So what we've come up with is embedded views. And embedded views are basically that we lend you real estate into our application. So in here, you get access to Forma native functionality, project data, all that contextual stuff that we do relatively well or have it integrated already. If you want to try out an MVP, it's a lot of work just to get that geometry, but inside of Forma, you already have it. And the functionality that you have, we update all the time. I think the SDK that we have got released in September or October and went from 0.10 to 0.52 in 4 months. So we try to be very proactive. And if you guys have any wants or needs, go talk to me or Magnus afterwards. We're happy to discuss. All right, so I think now, since this is a technical talk, oh, I forgot this. Yeah, this is an example of 3 embedded views. So here you have Plex Earth that provides satellite imagery that you can add into the scene. Here you have Vera's AI that uses Stable Diffusion for rendering our 3D scene in a more realistic way. You can also prompt it with different prompts if you don't like what they provide. And on the right-hand side, you have our shadow study, which is one of our internally made that you can fork because it's an open source repo that you can fork, and it's trying to be a very easy to get started point for you on GitHub. So how do these embedded views work? They're sandbox iframes. So if you don't know, an iframe is an embedded HTML page within another one. So you have a window within a window. That means that you decide what to create. You can have your own UI, and if you have, you could probably instrument it in a way that you don't have to make that many changes to your existing application. And what I think is a great benefit of having it as an iframe is that it allows you to use common browser functionality, local storage, session storage, workers, and yeah. It comes in a very well-known environment, and you don't have any offload that you require, especially on our end. When you're in the embedded view, we handle the authentication of that user, and so you don't have to. So these are just HTML pages with some JavaScript. You can change them all the time. No more DLL hell. And one of the great benefits of this, I think, is that you get to use all the very good JavaScript development tools. So you can work locally. This is a super simple extension. You're not supposed to read this because it's very bad quality, but just to show off how nice it is to have just hop module reloading. So here I just get some project data, and then I get the camera, and it instantly works. So this is all instrumented by the Forma Embedded View SDK. And now I think I want to get technical. So hopefully some of you guys know some JavaScript, but otherwise I think that's not super important. I think the main point here is, since it's an iframe, they're sandbox, they don't really know about each other. I want to just go through how this technically works, that one window talks to another over only window post message. So this is the only way that 2 windows can interact. That's at least the way we've set it up. So the Forma web app needs to listen to this message. This is JavaScript. Hopefully you can see what's there. If not, it's not super important. You listen to a message, and then you do something with it. So the Forma API needs, how do you then communicate? You need to define some protocol that both actors know. The Forma web app will listen to this iframe message request, and then it will send back some response. And the Forma web app also needs a router so that it has an API that you can understand, or they know what type of message gets routed to a particular function. So here it's just, if there's no handler, throw an error. It's a 404. Otherwise, do something with that data. Either it's getting some data, doing something with the scene, or basically just rendering. Because, yeah. And then in your iframe, so this is your application or your client-side code where you need to send these messages. So here we just send the message, and now nothing basically happens. Because this is just sending a message, you never wait for it to return. So how do you do that when everything is communicated via a post message? So you have this request ID, and then once you get this request ID back, so this is just a wrapper function. So once you get the request ID back, then you resolve this promise. So this is basically the entire request. So you just wait for the response. Pretty common stuff, right? So now that we've made our wrappers, the SDK functions look basically something like this. You just say, hey, get me the camera position. And then the Forma web app knows exactly what to do with camera/get. It returns some internal state and then just gives it back. The same goes for setting. So you have a camera/set, and then you change the internal state of the Forma application. So how do you do the events? Subscriptions. I want to know whenever the camera has changed. I don't think I will go too deep into this because the code here is not 100% correct. But yeah, it's basically subscribe pub/sub pattern, so it's not too difficult. Okay, so I've talked a lot about, and then you have your app, and the Forma SDK will instrument it, and we will just return some. You basically don't have to write any of this code yourself, right? So this is what you do. Await Forma, camera, position, get current, which is the actual function of that name in our SDK. And before I want to show what you can do with this, I just want to mention some of the drawbacks, because there are some drawbacks, and I think one a bit annoying thing is that everything is async. Since this is the two windows, they operate on different threads, so the way they communicate is via the post message, and that will then have to be serialized and deserialized for every single request. So for bigger amounts of data, this might have a penalty. So that especially goes for geometry. If you have super complex models in the scene or want to create super complex models, but we haven't really noticed. We don't think the penalties are greater than everything that these iframes allow us. And I'm not sure how many here know JavaScript. Yeah, so I guess that's the drawback. But for that, we have some HTTP APIs that we are actively working on as we speak. So if you want, check it out. But yeah, that is obviously one of the drawbacks. But we are on the web. There's not much that we can do about it. So here we have basically using the functionality that we just went through. So I realized that the code on the right is very, very bad, and this is also bad quality. But you get the camera position, you listen to the changes of that camera position, and then you can reset it back to the original position. That's how this app works. And as you can see, there are not a lot of code here. You get access to all this functionality, setting up this scene, and doing not super complex stuff, but it would require way more coding. And that's what I mean by this talk, that you get a lot of stuff out of the box. You get this contextual data, and you get interaction, some design tools, and some project data, a lot of stuff. Analysis as well. And I thought I wanted to show you just something we did for Christmas, which was an internal hackathon that we had in our team. 5 seconds. That we had in our team before Christmas. So here, everything that you see are different extensions. They were made in one day by 2 or 3 people, I think, each of them, of course. So at the top left, you have an instant sun that uses the web GPU to calculate the sun conditions. On the top right, you have a terrain editor mode. And then at the bottom left, you have a pathfinding algorithm using ant swarm. I'm not sure. The guy who made it has a doctorate in some biology, data science. He's very smart. And then on the right, you have a parking cost calculator. So this just showcases how there are a lot of variety of what you can do with relatively little tools. Okay, so I'm soon wrapping up. So I just wanted to get back to this one, because I think this is some of the most important stuff. It's what is a good extension framework, because if we make something that's not enjoyable to work with, no one will do anything, and we don't achieve our vision. So I think we've hit the mark in some way on most of these. But I can really answer that because I'm not exactly objective on this. But we still have a ways to go with every single one of them. I think we could do something better with our documentation, have better tutorials. On the feedback loop and opinionated, I think at least the direction that we're going is very nice. I like it a lot, and I think it's fun to develop. On the business side, we haven't really, the only way right now is a dual subscription model, so the user will need to have a subscription at your app and our app. But this is something we're actively working on or figuring out because it's a hard problem. But still, I think the main point of my talk is still that you can try out your ideas very quickly, and that's something I think is very cool. Yeah, and please engage. Magnus and I will be here the entire weekend. So just come chat with us if you have any questions. And yeah, thank you.
Maybe we have time for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So thank you for your very thorough product presentation here. It was nice to see what you're working with currently and how it can be used by people at a hackathon and also afterwards if they want to. I was just curious. So your office now, it's obviously out of Spacemakers, and you became Autodesk.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself Autodesk now, or is it like this satellite office? Are you still having that startup kind of vibe to it, or how are you working every day at Autodesk Forma?
I don't think we don't work really that different from before the acquisition. I mean, I'm not the best one to answer this because I started after the acquisition. But from what I feel is that everyone that I talk to is more or less the same. Of course, there are some other boundaries or something that we need to deal with, but it's still very, very fun. We're still in our own little bubble, sort of in our day-to-day lives at least. But then you unlock so much more, right? There are so many people within Autodesk that knows so much about this industry and technology and so forth. So it's
so even though you have been acquired by a big company, you still have the chance to feel like a smaller office doing something startup-ish, right? Maybe you have something to add to this, Magnus?
I don't really have that much to add. I think I agree. Culture has not changed at all. And Autodesk has been very, they invested in the team and not the product, right? So we have actually thrown away the whole SpaceMaker product and started from scratch since the acquisition. Not because Autodesk wanted to, but because we felt it was right. So yeah, we're still the same people mostly, having the same culture and the same views on how everything should fit together. So.
And just before we give the mic to the audience, do you have any advice for people who has already founded their startup but is considering to move to the next level? Is there something to remember that is very important of that skip in order to maintain that culture?
I'm just a lonely engineer. So no, I don't have any advice that would be sound, I think, unfortunately.
Any questions from the audience? Do we have questions on the right side? I'm looking at the left side here. Okay, guys. Thank you, Autodesk Forma and Martin Norby, for joining us here today. Thank you. Yep. Of course, I also have a champagne for you.
I have to drink it before the plane tomorrow.
Let's see.
So if you want champagne today, then come by.
Here we go. That was all for today, for today's Tech Talk, guys. Please continue the hacking, and we will be back with some dinner later on. Thank you, guys. Thank you.